everyone? Shout out X for that awesome opener music. So tonight we're talking about spirituality. We're gonna let Cameron and Drake pop in as co-hosts. So this will be put on my YouTube as well at the end. But man, I'm liking X more and more every single day. I don't know about y'all, but this platform is great. I'm very glad it's a thing because you can talk about real stuff, and I don't think you get censored here like you do on the other platforms. All right, welcome, Cam. How you doing? You're muted, but I see you here. What's up, everybody? Hey, Colin, Justin, Kaylana, John. How y'all doing? Hey, Cam. Does that work better? I see you're unmuted, but I definitely don't hear you. Cool. We'll get set up here in a minute. Hey, Keith. Welcome to the party. If y'all listen to the recording, maybe just wait a minute and then pop in. All right. Let's go. So we had an awesome X hangouts or spaces last week, and we talked about education and exposed the corrupt scam of an education system that is accepted by the mainstream. And we were talking about how really these set of X spaces that we're doing is the most important conversation in the universe. And that's not just hyperbole, it's fact. What we'll get into tonight is going to be awesome. If you're a super spiritual person who thinks you need to align your chakras, you might get triggered, but it'll be for good. So I'm looking forward to that. Let's see. I know, Cam, I know you want to talk. Trying to see if you sent me a message here. Cool. Well, we'll get settled here in a minute. Hey, there you go, Cam. Your speaker, be muted. There we go. Oh shit! The iconoclast has entered the chat.
I'm assuming you can hear me then.
Definitely. I don't know. I don't know if Drake's on yet, but I think we can just hop into it. So
yeah. So I kind of heard a little bit about what you said in the beginning, but yeah, I think we'll have some fun. Did you tell everybody just if you want to speak, just request the speaker thing, and then we can kind of go through people?
Yep. Yeah.
Did you already introduce the topic or say anything about it yet?
Not really. Do you want the honors here, or I'm happy to as well?
Okay. Yeah, I can do it. Okay, so basically, this hangout last time, Mitch, you just said that we talked about the education system and all that. So we were looking at other topics we could do, and we agreed on spirituality for this one. And obviously, we put what is spirituality really? So it's just taking apart that word. And when I was looking at that word, I felt like it kind of encompasses not only what people mean by spirituality, but also religion as well. Although, formalized religion may be a specific topic on its own. But I would say if anybody wants to speak about religion in the context of spirituality, that's cool too. And I think just like last time, I'll kind of maybe share some points, and anybody who wants to speak can share, and then I'll probably jump in and add things here and there. But I guess just in terms of opening the point up, the way spirituality is defined, I'll just start with this. It's totally within self-interest. And I know many people might think, well, hold on, I'm a spiritual person and I care about other people and it's about compassion and all these other things, right? But if spirituality were truly about helping others and you're being self-honest within the point, you'd have to realize, okay, let's look at the reality that we live in. We live in a physical reality, a reality where there are certain parameters that are required to be met within, balance for you to be able to exist here as a human being or an animal or a plant or just anything for that matter. Everything has, according to its different form, has certain needs. And when you look at the physical world, you look at how plants and animals interact, and then you look at how humans interact with the world, it's like two different, it's almost like humans are aliens on this planet. Like we've just conquered this planet and we just see everything is for us, for to do with it what we like. And then within that, you've got the hierarchy of human beings where human beings think, the whole world plus the human system is just for their benefit, and then they exploit other human beings. And I would suggest that if everybody had their basic needs met and had no reason to suffer unnecessarily, then spirituality would have a totally different meaning than it currently does. Because I think right now, mostly what spirituality is for people is it's a way of trying to alleviate some kind of suffering within themselves, or justify why they have to suffer now for something better later. And there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of wishful thinking, but it's not done from a real perspective of self-responsibility, of making the planet, the reality that we all share, actually best for everybody. So there's a lot of dimensions to that. That's just kind of my initial, opening up of the subject. But I want to hear from you guys, or whoever's, wants to speak, your perspective on, specifically within the context of destiny and the destiny principles, and maybe your experiences with spirituality, or what you see is the common patterns that people participate in with spirituality. So those are just some kind of things we can explore. But I really want to just take this word apart, not from the perspective of spirituality is total bullshit, but from the perspective that, hey, it actually could be something cool. And I guess I'll just kind of add my points as we go as to what I see that could be. But it has to be done within the context of considering what's best for all, right? So anybody want to add some points initially just based on that, or kind of whatever you want to add, really?
Yeah. I'll share a little bit here. I used to be a self-proclaimed very spiritual person for years and years and years before I found Destiny and this group. I was the kind of guy where, so I grew up in religion. I was raised Lutheran, which is like, I would call it the most watered down version of Christianity. It's like, you should accept Jesus, but it doesn't really matter. And you should be a good person, but, it doesn't really matter. And it was like, I was just always left with these questions of like, what is actually going on in the world? What happens when you die? And I had these questions that I wanted answered, and no one had the answers for me. And so that led me searching. And I mean, I tried a lot of stuff. I got into the whole Zen Buddhism thing. I got into meditation. I got into the whole shamanism thing. I mean, I tried ayahuasca. I did the, 5-MeO DMT. I mean, I went hardcore into spirituality. I went to all the festivals and all that. And at the end of the day, you have a fun, energetic high for like a little bit, and then you crash, and then you wake up back, on Monday morning, and you got to go to your shitty job, and you feel depressed, and it's like, man, no matter how quote unquote enlightened I felt, or how many cool insights I felt like I got, or this oneness experience with God or the universe, I couldn't run away from the reality that the system just kept pulling me back in, and I was not actually genuinely happy or fulfilled. And then thankfully I found you guys. And I remember actually when I first met like Cameron specifically, and Drake and some others in Denver, Colorado. This was 5 years ago. We actually pulled apart this word spirituality, and I was looking at, well, what is the root of the word spirit? When you actually look at the etymology, it means breath and to breathe. And I didn't really get that at that time. But I did start to realize that, okay, this whole enlightenment thing is a giant fucking trap. Because, like, think about it like this. So in Buddhism, there's apparently two types of Buddhas. So you're Buddha when you are enlightened and you realize you're one with everything. The first kind, they call it a bodhicitta, and that's where you realize enlightenment and then you just run off into the woods and you're in this state of ecstasy and you basically just meditate for the rest of your life. Which, from my perspective, was total bullshit. Even from when I heard about it, I was like, how can you go do that? How can you just give up? But then there's another kind, they call it a bodhisattva. And that's where you have this enlightenment experience and you realize, oh, I'm one with everything. But then in that moment, there's like a sense of equality too, where then that individual makes a vow to say, I will not go back to the Enlightenment until every last being is free and liberated. And that always stuck with me. And so, but I never knew how to actually implement that. So when I found you guys and I found Destiny, and what I think spirituality actually is now is spirituality is the realization that you are a being and you are a body and you have a mind, but there's this parasitic set of programming which is called ego, and that is our reality we find ourselves in. So spirituality would be the study of that, the living of that, and the refining of that to make it be the best. But the other huge part is, so the world, we are one with the world. Like we are all this universe. But if we're not careful, we then are blind to the fact that we have created a system, we've all accepted and allowed the system that basically promotes enslavement. And what a lot of people who are, spiritual don't see fully is that in the same way a lot of people look at, God and the ascended masters and the angels and this whole hierarchy of heaven, kind of thing, that is the same exact pattern. So like looking and accepting, oh, there's some God who's overseeing everything, and then you got the angels and these ascended masters and the enlightened ones, and then you got us, and then there's some demons. It's like this whole chain of command basically. By us accepting and allowing that, it's also us accepting and allowing how in the system there's the elite. You got, your Klaus Schwab, you got the Rockefellers, you got the bankers, and they kind of run everything. And then you got the managers, the mid-level managers, and then you got the middle class, and then you got the poverty. It's still accepting the same thing, which what we're presenting here as destiny and as self-perfection is fundamentally changing that so everyone is a self-leader. And sure, there are going to be different organization structures and things like that, but really it's grassroots, change the culture, help all of us go God mode, basically, become our best self. And then as we do that, we can then change the systems by changing the culture, changing politics, changing the laws, all of that, which actually governs the world, because the world is not governed by your energetic state. It's not governed by if you feel hype and, you did your morning, meditation. The world is governed by a real system that's here, and it's embedded into our laws and the economics and everything. And so we got to be really brutally honest about that. So the most spiritual way to live would be to go all out in actually changing the system, right? That's what I would call real divinity. So that's at least my opening take on it. But I want to hear from I know Drake and Kyle. I see both of you guys here. I know you guys both went deep on the whole spiritual realm too. What do you guys want to bring in?
Oh man, I'm ready to hear Kyle, but I'll share a little bit of my background. It's kind of similar to yours. I grew up Christian, but not Lutheran. We did go to a Lutheran church, but that was very brief. I went to like so many different churches, so many different like denominations and all of that, right? But I remember learning about the idea of Jesus and what he was doing and basically like healing people. And I remember in my childhood the idea of Jesus was just like, oh, and maybe the you might be the next Jesus, or that person, you never know. And I was fascinated by that idea and thinking to myself like, oh, I really want to be or aspire to be like that. But then also being told all around me by the people who were also following this that that's not possible, and it's just an idea, and basically you can just forget about it because it's never gonna happen, and we're all sinners and you're not perfect and nobody's perfect, and so you're just gonna make mistakes and just accept that. And I remember feeling like that was I don't know. It seemed really empty to me. It seemed really like there was something lacking, something missing for sure. And then fast forward in my life, very similar to Mitch, went to parties and raves and things like that, and experimented with, mushrooms and things like that, and feeling like that was really like a big experience of like, wow, I've never felt moved like this before. And I can see a lot of people going through that today, right now. And a lot of, I would say, I guess I'd call it propaganda. And, a lot of things out there promoting that idea to young people today, and even seeing young people fall into that. And I know that from my own experience, I tried that. I also did, meditation. I also studied different religions, spirituality, all that stuff. And especially like the law of attraction, like just seeing all of that as maybe this is the thing that's going to make my life better. Maybe this is the thing that will make sense. And trying to fit all of that into just having a better life, essentially, but not really seeing it as the thing that I wanted when I was really young, which was to help other people. I kind of still wanted that, but from the life that I had lived and everything that I had learned about religion and spirituality and all of that, that just seemed like it more and more came to the point of you just have to have your own good life and forget about everyone else. They just got to work on their own stuff. And, it's every man for himself, essentially, is the way that I learned like the modern spirituality today. And that is so fruitless, actually, because it ends up where you just go deeper and deeper into your mind and not actually being here, being present, being physical. Instead, it's just like, how much of a high can I get from myself? And that's what's being promoted today, right now, is like, how much of a high can you get just from yourself, just in your own mind, in your own thinking, in your own imagination, and maybe taking some drugs to enhance that, and maybe going to like a rave or a dance or something like that, and being with other people who also agree with you. And so now you got a really big high, and that's really what everybody I see is being pushed into, and missing out on what you were just describing, Mitch, of that divinity on earth, which I was talking with someone yesterday, and we were just talking about how so many people resonate with a story of someone being powerless and then developing themselves to be like super powerful and being the most powerful. And it's like this idea of, you shouldn't have stepped on me, or you shouldn't have ignored me when I was small, because now I'm a bigger person, and see how powerful I am, and see everything that I could do, and all of that. And there's a lot of, and I'm tying this into with the spiritual community. There's a lot of proclaiming like, I am a god, or we're gods, look at how powerful I am, or I'm gonna conjure these spirits, or whatever, right? And it's this idea of like being really powerful that I see a parallel with. And I guess the point that I'm making is that when you're actually being divine, like if you're like claiming this divinity, if you're actually being divine, you would look at this system, you would look at this world out here, and you'd go, wait a minute, regardless of what quote unquote powers I have or anything like that, the important thing here is that we align ourselves and everything that we're doing with what's best for life. Like, can we align with life as opposed to just participating in a system that is cold, a system that does not care about our well-being, a system that is just using us and mining us for what we can do in the moment, and then throwing us away at the first chance that it gets, right? As soon as we become unuseful, essentially, right? And unfortunately, so many people are going along with that system without even questioning it, without even thinking about it, and even getting sucked into the spirituality, like you're saying, with all the dimensions of like demons and angels and archangels and all that stuff, and just getting sucked into that and not realizing that you're just basically acquiescing to an authority that you don't understand. Like, a lot of religion is just based on authority, not questioning anything, but just going along with it. Like, look at the story of Adam and Eve. It's like they got kicked out because they didn't listen to authority. Never mind that they didn't understand, what the why they shouldn't eat from the fruit or anything like that. But then you fast forward into the next like major story, and you got the story of Abraham, where he's being praised for his blind acquiescence to authority, where he's going to stab his own son and sacrifice him because he was told by the higher up, that's what you got to do. And so I think it's time that we question that authority within ourselves, of just handing over authority to whoever is, seemingly got, the right answers, or seemingly the bigger person, or in charge or whatever, and actually look at, okay, does this make sense as far as how I want to live? How, if I were in those other people's shoes, if I would want them to act this way, or myself to act this way towards them, and actually bringing it all together. And that's what we have with the Destiny material. I've never seen something explained so comprehensively and so easy to comprehend, actually, when you have the materials, you have the tools, and you have the curriculum in front of you, essentially. And if you want to learn it, it's there for you, and you don't have to believe anything if you just study it, and you can use your common sense and go, oh wow, this makes a lot of sense. And that's what I've gotten from what we're doing. And I'm excited that this is growing and that we can share this and prevent people from going down the same path that leads to nowhere that we've all been down. So yeah, with that, I'll pass it. Go ahead.
Hey, that was great. I want to read something real quick. I was just looking up on Wikipedia. Right, I did a Google search of divine spirituality just to see like what comes up, because it's like when you were talking, and Mitch made the point too about talking about ascended masters and angels and demons, and I was just looking at how people can define spirituality in so many different ways. You know what I mean? Like you can go that direction, or you can go into like Buddhism, like Mitch was saying, or it might just be, a person's inner feeling of something. It's like there could be. It doesn't. Maybe like a person says I'm spiritual, and they never heard of ascended masters. You know what I mean? It could mean something totally different to them. So I was looking at, well, what's the common point that really defines spirituality broadly? And I just wanted to read this. It's like just 2 paragraphs from Wikipedia. It says the meaning of spirituality has developed and expanded over time, and various meanings can be found alongside each other. Traditionally, spirituality is referred to, I guess it means, as a religious process of reformation, which aims to recover the original shape of man, oriented at the image of God, as exemplified by the founders and sacred texts of the religions of the world. The term was used within early Christianity to refer to a life oriented toward the Holy Spirit, and broadened during the late Middle Ages to include mental aspects of life. In modern times, the term both spread to other religious traditions and broadened to refer to a wider range of experiences, including a range of esoteric and religious traditions. Modern usages tend to refer to a subjective experience of a sacred dimension and the deepest values and meanings by which people live, often in a context separate from organized religious superstitions. This may involve belief in a supernatural realm beyond the ordinarily observable world, personal growth, a quest for an ultimate or sacred meaning, religious experience, or an encounter with one's own inner dimension. So that's, I think, really kind of encompasses everything for everybody. And I just want to point out before I pass it on to someone else, like, you notice in there, nowhere does it say it's a person's inner sense of realizing that they co-create this reality with every other life form that exists, and that they are equally responsible for what they accept and allow. And the whole purpose of spirituality is to realize this point so that you can stand up and always only accept and allow what is best for all. It doesn't say anything about that. It's like all about either trying to reach out and find some external thing that's greater than you, or find your inner sense of meaning. There's no like, hey, I'm creating reality, we're all creating reality, let's create the best reality. But that's so obvious when you look at like how simplistic the perspective I'm giving right there is, and yet it's nowhere in there. It's like this search for the sacred meaning of something, and you're like, there's no fucking meaning. There's just what's in front of us, what's here. Now there may be like aspects to what's in front of us that we can't perceive or we don't understand, but that doesn't mean there's some intrinsic meaning that we can't perceive. It just means there's like hidden mechanics that we're not aware of. You know, like science and relationships and the way things work that maybe we're not aware of. But the fundamental meaning is something that we give to reality based on what we accept and allow. Either we give it the meaning of it's best and I'm here to give as I want to receive, or we give it the meaning of I'm here to compete and I'm here to survive and I'm here to take and I'm here to be on top and I want everyone to give to me and I'm the most important. You know, or you can hide behind the idea of I'm not important at all and I'm just selfless, but I get a good feeling out of that. But at the end of the day, the simplicity of I'm here as an equal co-creator of reality amongst everyone else, and I have to take responsibility for what I accept and allow, and then actually go and evaluate all the relationships in this world that you have and that exist outwardly and see, like, are they actually best, or are they producing consequences that are not best? And the thing I think about that doesn't appeal to people is like this, it's not sexy. You know, it's not like, oh, I get something from that. It seems really mundane, and it doesn't play into that person's desire for like energy and being special and all of that. But the reality is, like, if we had a world that was best and everyone had their basic needs met as a baseline standard, and we realized the equality of all life, like, let's talk about being special. We wouldn't care about needing to be on top. It's like everybody would have a baseline that's really nice, and then we could build upon that. And I think that's the big point that all spirituality is missing. And for people who are in a position to pursue spirituality in any sort of like meaningful way where they spend time pursuing it, they're actually in a position to do something about changing the system in this world, or they would have the time and space to place themselves in a position to do that. And they're being distracted down a rabbit hole of just pursuing self-interest without maybe realizing it. And I think it's similar to religion, where if someone kind of claims to be religious, I think it's a normal program within us to be like, oh, at some level they're a good person, instead of realizing, like, no, if you're religious or you're spiritual, at the end of the day you're still self-interested. And when I say self-interest, it doesn't mean that like yourself doesn't matter. It just means you're only interested in yourself. You're only interested in what happens to you, your existence. You're not really looking at all of existence, all of reality equally. And you haven't realized yet that actually every other self is you in another life. And therefore, your self-interest can't only be about you. It has to be about all, which also doesn't mean that you have to give up yourself. But people even abuse that point in spirituality, where it's like, well, I'm just going to be, I think the term is like atavistic or something, where it's like, I'm just going to, you know, relinquish myself and there is no self and all this shit. And it's like, no, that's actually just you searching for an experience. Like that Buddha, what was it called? The bodhicitta or whatever you said, Mitch, right? Like the person who just like, well, I'm just going to go off and pursue my enlightenment. But like literally, if you think about what that is, you're literally just going off and you're trying to experience a feeling like forever. That is so empty, actually. That is so completely empty. And we're all missing out on what experience we could even potentially have if all of reality was moving coordinated as one, equal, like truly giving as it wanted to receive. Imagine if every part of reality was doing that, right? So again, that's just kind of deeper into how I look at the spirituality point. Is it's not that it's you got to just throw it all away. It's just that we have to realign it to see, like, man, actually the way we're living spirituality right now is so limited because it's only about self, not self as all as equals, but just self as the individual only. And so it's like this very self-interested pursuit that's extremely, extremely limited. Okay, we got some other speakers here. I know Kyle had his, well, I guess you didn't have your hand up, but you were sitting there as a speaker for a while. Kyle, do you want to say something? Are you still?
Sure.
Okay, there we go.
It's so like giving some context or background of myself. It's funny, like listening to Drake and listening to Mitch. It's like everything that they said I actually done. Like what I mean by that, I was my parents was like, I guess Baptist, but we just went to church and we occasionally went to church. And then I then joined later. I joined the Nation of Islam, which is pretty much a sect of being of Islam, so Muslim. Then I joined Buddhism, then Taoism, I'm actually studied Confucianism, went to China, try to understand it there. Um, and then what specifically for myself, my sister died at 25, and then that's when I just started questioning reality. You know, sometimes uh, it shouldn't be this way, but how the system is set up, a lot of times people decide to start changing once they get close or they hit rock bottom. And so that's where I got interested in it, not even interested, heavily delved into the spirituality. I had cardiac arrest on my floor. I was like 24, 23. Then I went to a place and in the States and went to did my first ayahuasca ceremony. Then eventually I started hosting ayahuasca ceremonies, Cambo, Bufro. I was DMT. I was just doing so many things, just trying to figure it out, even joint Scientology, because I was just looking for things to understand this mind, or really what I come to find out now, I was trying to understand the world because it didn't make sense to me. I even had created groups, which was like called the Fifth Dimension, where we had a book that I was reading about how do we create a world that is best for all. The thing is, what I later come to find out is that everybody definition of best for all was different. And I thought at that time was if I can just get everybody to be enlightened and know that, you know, the law of attraction, if you think positive, you get positive. But my life was rocky. It was in shambles. It was in shit. I was sleeping under a bridge for a few days, jumping from relationship to relationship. And actually, right before I found this group, this was like my last like chance. And what do I mean by that is I actually took out a insurance policy because I was contemplating suicide. So I took out an insurance policy, but just to see like a person that would take out an insurance policy, not even knowing like that, and that's I later kind of found out I was illiterate, but not even knowing that if you take out insurance policy and commit suicide, it's null and void. But I found like this group. I found the materials on Destiny from a YouTube link, and it was funny. It was a faulty YouTube link, but it forced me to reach out. Then I say all that to say, like years later, I was able to see. Really, I thought that, oh yeah, I'm trying to help everyone, but I was going deeper and deeper into the dimensions or the cages of my mind because the more drugs, the more abuse that I got throughout life that I accepted and allowed, I got deeper and deeper into my mind, which is deeper and deeper into separate. So I didn't start not to care about the other person. I only cared about my self interest. And hey, everybody needs to do this plant medicine. But then in one of my ceremonies, I experienced someone go through psychosis. So I'm like, and I still believe that that was the way. But how could that be the way if this man, I literally just saw this man who was in his 20s literally lose his mind in a course of hours where he's screaming and yelling and running and they had to chase him down. And I started to see later now that I can process more information and I have a better understanding of what reality actually is. I was just all in my self-interest. And really I was just taking. I was a taker. And when you grow up in environments where people just take, eventually, even if you are a giver, a lot of us, I'm pretty sure, experience that we've given to people and then they burnt us. And it's like, I'll get to a point where you're just like, I'm not going to give anymore. And then become a taker. And like the last point I would share here on this point is, within this being a part of this group, I realized that there are people out here who care, who want to give. And as I was a taker, and I kept taking, and eventually I had the tools to see myself and change my perspective and let go of the stories and narratives that I was telling myself that no longer, or the imprints that I got as a child that no longer served me. I began then to give. And then once you give, because that's the essence of life, the sun just gives, Mother Earth just gives. When you give, you become a receiver. And it's not that you're giving so you can receive something, but that's just the cycle of giving and receiving versus a taker. They come to take, and that's one-sided transactions. So now, like being a part of the destiny and the material, I started to see is like oh, as I can process more information and I read more of the blogs and understanding like my essence of life is to give. So I have to give more. And the more that I give, the more that my life became better because why? There's less people around me struggling. If I'm a millionaire and my neighbors are poor, they're going to come after me. So I've learned in the context of spirituality, a lot of times there were people that coming from religion still have the religious program, but then what they would do is in the community that I was a part of, they're wearing their trauma as a badge, as the honor, as a shield, and it's as if it's people in the same asylum just walking their everyday life. They just didn't get put in an institution yet.
Yo, right on, Kyle. Thanks for sharing that.
I see Keith wants to speak.
Yeah, hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. It's so cool to hear all of.
Well, he muted.
Can you hear me?
No,
Joel.
Keith, we hear Keith. I think
Oh.
Cam, your audio's on.
Oh, sorry guys. Okay.
Okay.
My bad.
It's so cool to hear all of your backgrounds. Like it's I don't know. It's interesting. It's like coming to the Destiny material. I got here through Maya, my wife, and I don't know what the sound was. Hopefully you guys can still hear me.
Yeah, you're good.
But okay. Anyway, yeah, like I grew up not in any kind of religious background, but it was like this weird confusion about what religion was, the point of it, what spirituality was, what being spiritual was, what the point of being here was. Like nobody understood that. Nobody was able to explain to me, why we. My dad was Jewish growing up. He was raised that way, and so we celebrated some of the Jewish holidays with his family, and nobody could explain the purpose of them or why we did what we did or any of the prayers, other than some kind of like maintaining history. But it was like, what's the point of any of that stuff? It never made sense to me. My parents didn't raise me with any particular faith. They just said, you'll figure it out. Like you can, like whatever you want to do, whatever you want to explore, go for it. We're open to you doing that. We're not going to tell you what any of this stuff is. So there was no guidance or support, and they didn't have any understanding of it either. They just said, kind of go out and figure it out. And so in that journey, I dabbled in some of the things, and I don't think I went as deep into some of this stuff as what you guys have shared, but I found my way to landmark education when I was in college through my dad, and that is what they say is that they're studying the nature of being. So they say it's an ontological conversation, which is like, okay, so if it's not spiritual, then maybe there's something in the study of being. Like if spiritual can't be defined, if it's too confusing, it's too nebulous, I can't nail it down to anything, then maybe the nature of being, like what am I being in the moment, is something closer to what I'm trying to get at. But that, like as you guys have said, it was still very much about trying to place myself in the world, like not the world, like what is the world, or what are we all here doing here together, like what is the purpose of being here, but like my place, like what is my place in this, like what is my experience, what's the meaning of my experience in this. And so my approach in that was, in the landmark stuff and the nature of being, is what is my role, or like what is my experience, and then that led me into like relationships and sex and more like hedonistic kind of experiences. Like it's like, okay, if it's my experience that really matters, then why don't I focus on that, because that seems to be the only like real reality that I'm aware of, is just what's immediately in front of me, which somehow like I'm experiencing that through my being or my experience. So then that must be what the world is, and that's what life must be about. So let me dive into that. And in Landmark, and then in my diving into like sex and relationships and stuff like that, I was very much like I was talking to people about it. I was inviting people to come participate in the conversations and, you know, take the courses and like do all of that stuff. And like I was very vocal about it. And there was even this conference, and it was like in San Francisco, they have all kinds of that's where I was living. They have all this like crazy conferences where it's like this one, I can't remember what they called it, but it was like astrology and palmistry and numerology and sex and you know, I don't even know, all like tantra and all kinds of like massage and all this stuff that was like really based in everyone's individual personal experience and trying to either quote unquote tap into something, which was really just the mind when I like look at it now. But when I was there was this woman that walked by. We had this like booth, and there was this woman that walked by, and she said, okay, so you guys are like, you're talking about sex and relationships and like that. Okay, so like, but what are you doing about the refugees in Cambodia? And I was like, what? Like, what does that have to do with anything that we're doing here? And she was like, no, but like, what are you doing about like real suffering in the world? And I was like at a total loss. I was like, I don't know, like nothing, like we're not doing anything about that. And after that, it stumped me so much. And then after that, I went and I talked to the guy that was kind of running the booth, and I was like, what do you say to somebody like that? And he said, oh, you know, we say that we are handling our own individual experience, and by improving our own lives, then we kind of create this ripple effect, this wave that, you know, moves out into the world. And like, we believe that that really does have an impact. And then over time, if people are really caring for their own experience, then that will have an impact. And I was like, okay, but it stuck with me that that wasn't really an answer. And there was an inherent problem in what this woman had confronted me with, this really valid question, like, what are you doing about that stuff? And as I started reflecting on like, what am I doing here? Like that, like it was like this chink in the armor of like, okay, wait a minute. Like there is something bigger here than just my personal experience. What is actually going on here? And when I started to look at like what spirituality or the nature of being or whatever, like that investigation, it was always this very nebulous, uncertain, like just like constant searching and constant confusion about these like feelings. Basically, it was like, do I feel connected to source, or do I feel connected to my breath, or do I feel connected to my partner, or like, and can I sit and be in silence and be connected to silence? And it's like, what does any of that actually mean? Like, isn't it just as simple as like, oh, I'm like in my body and I can feel my body and that's it? But it's like much more complicated than that. And there's all this other stuff. And I got so caught up in Drake said something about this, like the kind of like the ego or the getting lost in like, oh, could I be Jesus? Could I be the next savior? Could I be, you know, like if I really get to, you know, that level of enlightenment that I'm really trying to get to, could I be that next savior? And it's just, it's all based on this potential, which is just founded in confusion. Like there's just no direction to it at all. And that's what I found, that there was just confusion and hope and potential. And that's it. And that's all there was to spirituality. That's all I ever found there. But when you look at like, one of the things that really struck me when I started looking at the destiny stuff is the principles. And the principles are, it's just a way of, I don't want to simplify these, but like, it's a way of clarifying purpose. It's like, oh, we're here to actually do something, and that doing can be expressed through these principles. And the spiritual part of it, like, can that be captured and used to serve that purpose? I think, like, if spirituality is really just feeling a particular way, then yes, it could be harnessed and used that way. And is spirituality like a feeling of like fulfillment or connectedness, or again, it's like a feeling, but it's like, if the purpose of like doing good is to feel a particular way, and that's what it is to be spiritual, then sure, we could harness that. But is that actually what spirituality is? I don't know. It seems like it's just based in a feeling or a certain state or an experience. But the principles and actually living the principles is like, that is the opportunity of being in reality. It's like, no, this is actually the impact that I have. This is the actual life that I have. This is what I can actually do with that life. So there's spirituality to me was like always this confusing, very nebulous thing, not founded in reality, founded in some idea, which is of the mind. But it wasn't actually real. It wasn't the thing that was going to make any difference for the people, you know, the refugees in Cambodia or wherever.
So Keith, what?
Hey, that point you made, Keith.
Yeah, go
Can
ahead.
you hear me? Okay, that point you made about when that woman asked, okay, what are you doing for the people in Cambodia? I was looking at that because it's like, we should be doing something for the people in Cambodia. And then the response is, well, I'm doing this spiritual path. I'm taking care of my experience, and that will ripple out. Never mind, does anyone ever actually look at the mechanics of how that actually works? Like, show me the actual ripple. Like, is it some kind of energy beam? Like, what's the physical actual thing that ripples out that makes a difference? No one ever really dives into the actual specific mechanics of it. But also, if somebody can justify, like, well, I'm living my experience and that will ripple out. It's like, well, then what is the measurement of whether what you're doing qualifies as something that would ripple out and have a good effect?
Right.
Meaning, let's say somebody's just like a drug kingpin or something. Okay, who's to say that their experience is not as spiritual as the person who's doing the tantric sex or something, or meditating and thinking about compassion? Like, if we're just looking at it from the perspective of, I'm living my experience and that ripples out, what is the standard by which we judge whether that is valid in terms of, like, okay, I'm doing a thing that is on the net good, or I'm doing something that's bad? Like, we would say, well, obviously, some pimp in the ghetto who's like abusing women and like slapping them around and taking their money after they do tricks and and keeps them hooked on drugs, that's not a spiritual person. It's like, well, what criteria are you using to judge that? And I think we all know, like, well, okay, but that's harming people, right? But then do we take that in self-honesty all the way and go, okay, how is what I'm participating in my own life, in every relationship? And when I say relationship, I don't just mean like with me and my spouse or my kids or my friends. I mean your relationship to um, anything, like your job, government, your relationship to the environment, like every relationship that you form, your relationship to money, how you spend it, what you allow, your relationship to the legal system, like what laws you allow. And you may not even directly allow it, but you're here in reality. And if something's going on in reality and you're not actively doing something about it that would actually change it, or would in the future get you to a point where it could be changed, then you're accepting it. You're allowing it. Even if it's just a matter of I'm just speaking out so I can gather more awareness about the point and then something can be done about it. At least you're no longer just flat out accepting it. But the idea of I'm pursuing a spiritual path and it's about how I feel, and my feelings are the guide as to whether I'm being spiritual and making progress on this spiritual path. Think of all the things that we have to accept along the way that are not best. Like, even to be in the position where you can pursue spirituality, you have to have money. And someone might say, well, no, look at the poor people in Mexico or the poor people in, I don't know, like Tibet or some shit, right? Like just in some poor country where everyone's just super poor, right? They're so spiritual and they're so connected to their faith and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, but at the top, like you go to any poor country and you look at the masses of people who are poor and they're so spiritual, they're all giving their spiritual, I don't know, energy or whatever you want to call it to some hierarchy where someone sits at the top who's in some level in the elite. Who's, if you like, for example, I know right now the big thing is Catholicism. Like all these people are turning back to Catholicism, like, because of all the anti-Semitism and all this shit, and everyone's like, Catholicism's the true way, and it's just another cycle, right? Like Candace Owens, and you see some of these people, right? And like Russell Brand, right? But it's like at the top of that is some hierarchy. Like there's some person sitting at the top, like the Pope, who's probably he's like basically the CEO of one of the biggest real estate companies on the planet. And you don't think that these people at the top of this hierarchy are connected into the money system in like really fundamental ways? Like if the Vatican was like, we're going to pull out all our real estate or sell all our real estate and move all our money over here, like that doesn't affect the economy, and then all the other players in the economy like wouldn't like have something to say about it, or they'd probably try to negotiate. It's like they're players in the bigger picture of all of this. So even the people who would maybe be like super poor and like they don't need fancy things and they're just really spiritual and grounded, they're all following by and large some religions where someone sits at the top in an elite position who benefits from the money system. So you can't even argue like, well, you don't need money to be spiritual, because it is the fact that people are still looking for that spiritual security that funds all of the major religions and spiritual movements. And those spiritual movements and religions are not in themselves, like in principle, in their you know charter or in their purpose or in their activities, actually trying to change the system so that it's best for all. They're just playing in the money system and they're doing nothing to change it. And so then they keep everyone else, through their systems, distracted on searching for meaning or being closer to God or something like that, instead of just looking directly at the reality that they're in and saying, why aren't we just making this better for everybody? Like if you were to think about what would the spirituality of a tree be, it'd be like, well, I produce oxygen and I get water from the ground. And if the water's polluted, it makes me sick. But if I'm not sick, I can produce a lot of acorns, and that feeds all the squirrels and the deer. Like they're not like, what is the meaning of life? They're just like, they're literally just by design, just giving and receiving. Like the total environment feeds them and nourishes them. But somehow as humans, because we live in a system where it's like we're born here, we don't remember how we created it long ago in the past. We just show up here and we're like, man, this system is fucked. It starts abusing us from day one, or we learn how to be the best abusers, so we're at the very top of it. In a lot of those people, probably all of them, were super abused, and that's why they're able to stay in those positions. And you just figure out how you can exploit the system that's here to keep trying to survive. It's this total fucked up game. That's it, and then we cover that up and say like, oh, but I'm searching for meaning, and so I'm spiritual. What the fuck does any of that mean? What difference does it fundamentally make to reality here on Earth or to your physical existence? And I think part of the problem is that, well, I know part of the problem is it's so hard for us to separate ourselves from who we are the moment we're born. So like when we're born here on Earth, then we have a family, we have a culture, we might have a religion, we get an education, like we see things on TV, we're immersed in media, and then the reality that we're born into immediately starts programming us, and then we start to believe that that's who we are. Whereas a tree doesn't do that. Like any other thing that's not a human being doesn't do that. They might be limited by their physical form, but they're not like, I have to behave a certain way because this is my culture or this is my belief or this is my opinion. And then so because we have the ability to be programmed, the moment we're born here, we get totally fucked up. And then we're like, what is the meaning of anything? Because it doesn't make any sense. So I really see, like, if we had a system that was best for all, where when you're born into it, you're not immediately abused, you're not immediately coming from a starting point of lack, there really wouldn't be any need for spirituality, much less religion, God, any of that stuff. And then what it would be it would be replaced with something that's a lot more grounded, that's like a realistic point. And maybe we can explore like what are all the dimensions of things we're not aware of, but it wouldn't be from like a neediness of like, I need to find the meaning, I need to save myself, I need to overcome some wrong that's been done to me or some hurt or some trauma. It would just be like, hey, I wonder what's out there, let's go explore. It's like when you're walking in the woods and you're just walking around with sticks and looking at trees and stuff. You're not like, what's the meaning of it? You're just like, oh, what's over there? Oh, that's interesting. It would be much more of like an innocent curiosity that would come about. But we tend to like compartmentalize ourselves into, I'm surviving. So like 99% of my day, I'm surviving, I'm competing, I'm trying to win, I'm trying not to lose, I'm trying to avoid negative experiences, seek positive experiences. And there's this little tiny percent where we're like, and now I'm going to explore the deeper meanings of things. And I'm going to look for that meaning that I'm missing. And it's like, well, maybe if we weren't spending most of our time here wasting it trying to compete, because we're still accepting and allowing a system that's based on inequality and lack, we wouldn't be we wouldn't have that desire to look for that meaning in something, because the meaning would be self-evident. It would just be like, I'm just here existing and everything's pretty good, and I know how to increase and improve the balance of things, and I'm not trying to fuck people over, so I don't need to defend myself, so I don't need to mistrust people. And when you really look at the basic fundamental point of spirituality, which you can look at it in Christianity, give unto another as you want to receive, or love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, what else do you really need other than an understanding of, well, if we live in a physical system, we'd have to have systems in place that actually allow us to embody that and not just pay lip service to it. Like, well, there's people suffering, I give to charity. Well, why don't we just solve the problem so there's no poverty anymore, right? And I think the big failure of the Christians is that they think because Jesus saved everybody, like saving people is some kind of mental thing or some kind of spiritual thing or something greater than just physical reality, that they miss the physical reality. They miss the point of, why aren't we just saving everybody right now? And then whatever happens after we die, we can deal with that then. But at least we wouldn't have on our conscience this point of like, I let the world go to shit while I just only cared about my own survival and my own, being saved from something. Okay. Let's see. Who else wants to add?
So,
Kyle, do you want to say something?
yes, I was sharing that a point where on my shamanistic journey, so this was like my second time was in a ceremony. This guy hosted it in a small Airbnb, like 20 some people's, like in a 1 bedroom. And there was a guy there that I was like, hey, I just felt within him, said, hey, you need to stop suppressing yourself. You need to be who you are, express yourself, and it's coming from your mom. However your relationship, your mom, you need to work on it. Okay. 2 years later, now I'm hosting ceremonies, ayahuasca ceremonies, and I call him to invite him, and he was like, yeah, that's cool. I have changed. Um, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I just kept telling him more about the ceremony, how much it costs. And he was like, yeah, but I've changed. And then I kept telling him more, and then he said it again. So then I'm like, okay, hold on. You keep saying you've changed. Like, that's life. At that time, I'm like, yeah, of course, that's what spirituality is. Like, that's what the medicines do. You're supposed to change. And he said, no. What I mean by that is I'm a woman. So to provide some more context, when I first met him, he was married with 2 little girls. So then I started to ask him, like, hey, so what happened with your wife and kids? They're like, oh no, we're still together. So my wife, yeah, she knows. So when I seen him, he looks like a woman. I still can tell that that's him. However, when I start later after the ceremony. I come to find out he's done it ayahuasca 22 times in 2 years. Typically, even people with PTSD, it's recommended every 6 months. I'm not promoting, I'm just telling you what the things that they were saying. So I'm like, okay, you've done this thing 22 times in 2 years. Then I'm asking, like, what are you chasing? And I was able to see in that point, because one of the principles here is my physical body is is my temple. That's one of the principles here at Destiny. But this person was just chasing energy, chasing energy so much that he started to say once when we were having an integration circle, so just speaking about his experience, he says, you know what, I'm scared because, people beat up transgender people because, um, people lie and say that they're really a woman, but they're a man. And I was so perplexed because he's like, I feel so weak now, but you were a man and you was once a boxer, so I'm confused. And I bring this up because of that may seem like an extreme case, but that's what's going on a lot in this next generation. Of you seen in school, they got Furbies. People are identifying as cats. People are identifying as dogs, and it's because of improper miseducation, the lack of education, and that they're just chasing feelings, chasing highs. So it's like it's as if they're addicts and they're addict for energy and want somebody to see me, whether they want to hide, but they're really hiding because of the abuse from the system top down. Because guess what? If wasn't having all of the pressure, or that was from the money system, because every decision that we make on a day-to-day life, like it's based off money, whether what school do our children go to, what time we wake up, what time we go to sleep, what kind of car we drive, what kind of food we eat. It's all based off the money system, which is creating a lot of pressure for people because why? They went through the education system and they didn't learn about money. They learned how to work for someone, but they didn't learn how to create money themselves. And so I saw in that moment that was my last one because I start feeling pressure. Like if I keep doing this, I'm going to go to jail. And then the person who I met him at, they gave him 20. He got caught because he was giving ayahuasca to an infant, and he got 22 years. And now I was seeing like how it was just to give my authority away, or for people just giving their authority away to something else because they don't understand reality, or that they don't want to take the responsibility of that this world fucked up. And once you realize that, you have to do something in the physical reality to change it. And what that's what I was seeing as I was a part of bigger spirituality groups where, okay, we're the 144,000. We're the special people. We have all these dreams and we have these words that can change us and give us power. But the thing is, they're only doing for their selective group. What about the rest of the world? What about your neighbor? What about the person that doesn't even view spirituality or care about spirituality or religion? Because the destiny principles, well, no matter what you believe in, and what I mean by that, whether you're a Christian, Buddhist, Islam, we're all, at the essence of it, we're a human, but our biases allow us to, it turns like a game. Well, I'm Christian, you Islam, and we can't be together, or we can't create a world of best for all. So if we just let go of these biases that we have within ourselves, but that takes, that's a journey, and that takes tools to be able to take those imprints or those conditions or the things that we've been conditioned with as a child. Those things have to be changed. So we're like the only group that's saying that, not even saying, that's actually doing. Because in the spirituality community, I was saying, let's create a world for best for all. I created a group, but nobody could process the information, including myself, and I was the leader. So now that we have tools, we're actually going out in physical reality to making people smarter, because even the elite who's accumulating all this wealth, they're even enslaved. Because why? They're in fear because they think, oh, I've done all this to these other peoples. I harmed all these other people. It's going to be one day that they harm me. So even the slave master is still enslaved. So instead, let's just educate more people and have more people walk the principles in this process so that we can create a world that is best for all and not just for one person or one group of family. But why not for everybody? Because 19,000 people in the U.S., there's 19,000 people that starve every day they're starving every day for a lack of food. That's equivalent to the Houston Rockets arena. That's a whole basketball of 19,000 people, and that's just here. So we're and this is the only place group that's doing something in physical reality and not just congregating and talking about it, but actually doing it in other countries and other continents so that we can create a system that is best for all and change the rules and the politics and the laws that's not just thinking for our self-interest, but the interest of all and everyone else. And that's what I wanted to share.
Amazing, Kyle. That was a wild set of stories, but I appreciate you took spirituality, like you took system spirituality all the way. I see Jess, you got your hand up, and then maybe Sandro or Owen after. So, hey Jess.
Hey everyone, can you hear me okay?
Uh, yeah, if you can be a little louder, that'd be great. But otherwise, we hear you. I know you got the sleeping baby with you.
Yeah, okay, cool. This conversation is so cool. Like, few and far between do you find somewhere that people are like so vulnerably sharing their experience. And then having gone through something so like abusive at its core, right? Like abusive on your body, abusive over the community reality as a whole, to come through that and to be so clear and certain after all that abuse. And what I mean by that is, like, for me, for example, like I grew up in a Christian household. It's so funny because there's so much terminology around spirituality as well, like a Christian household. And I just, from a young age, definitely felt like I was just doing what I was told. Like if I just could regurgitate the things I needed to regurgitate and acted the way that I needed to, that I would be accepted by a certain group of people, that I would be praised, that I would be secure because those people would provide for me if I ever needed. So it just gave me this like sense of security that I could see I didn't really have anywhere else. And so that drove me to continue to pursue and falsely create these situations in my life where it was like, oh, this happened for a reason. Oh, I'm going through this so that I can help other people going through these kind of situations. This all oh, this was all God, you know, like I one example of this is I was in a bad car accident, and I rolled into a farmer's field who happened to leave his house that day, wasn't going to, right? And then at the other farmer's house that he was at, he, the other farmer's wife convinced him to stay for dinner. And then afterwards, on his way home, after he wasn't even planning on going out and then staying out longer than he was going to originally, he saw my car in his field. And like for so long, everyone's like, oh, that's all God's doing. Like, oh, he was looking out for you and all this stuff. And it's like, why do we have to label things as such when in reality he just made a decision to leave his house that day, and the other farmer's wife happened to convince him to stay for dinner, and I happened to roll into his field. Like there's no external crazy thing going on, like, oh, someone's watching out for you, Jessica. You have a purpose in this life. Oh,
Well, and how did God actually talk to the farmer? Like, did he talk to the wife and whisper, "Hey, make sure you invite this
yeah,
guy"? And like, why didn't he just like maybe like not make your car roll over? It doesn't.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so within all of that, right? That's why I said you go through all these cycles of abuse within your life, of confusion and chasing these things because you don't know. Because the people who raised you weren't clear and certain themselves in how reality functions and works. And so you're left to go face your quote unquote spirituality with all these different programs, whether you grew up with a lot of Christian influence, or maybe it was Hindu, or maybe it was Buddhist, or maybe it was Mormon, or whatever, like all, or maybe it was just this quote unquote new age spirituality. Like, you're just brought up with a set of programming around what spirituality is, and then you've defined the situations you go through within that scope, within that lens, and that's what's led you to where you are today. And since I found this group, I I realized, okay, one, I was completely illiterate before this group. Like, in my head, I could have deluded myself to think, but I can see so many patterns in reality, but I'm more aware than the average person. I'm doing more good than the average person. I'm giving of myself more. Like, I'm, you could hold yourself on a pedestal as much as you want. But with the current system set up the way it is, nobody is being educated properly from a young age, especially around the topic of spiritualism. And if you don't have the foundation of a proper education in the first place, you're not going to understand how physical reality works. Thus, you're going to need a handicap to describe how reality works. Because as soon as you no longer process how reality works, it's now in God's hands. It's now because of God. It's now, oh, the farmer left his house because God was speaking to him miraculously. Like, you lose touch of reality where your program or where your understanding ends. And so that's what I see clearly, is like, if everybody just takes responsibility for themselves, and a lot of people are like, but how is that actually going to change anything? Because they don't understand how much of an impact each individual is making on the collective reality we're all participating in. We've been told that we're small. We've been told that it takes way more than just you to change things, that don't do anything because it's in God's hands. Like the definition of spirituality and all these religions currently make you feel small, and as if you can't do anything, that it's beyond you, and you just have to trust and you just have to believe. And the reality is, you just need to take responsibility for yourself. And you got to be humble in the most physical definition of that word, of like knowing, like measurably, I have a lot to take responsibility for, and I'm early in my process of doing that, but I'm committed to doing it. And in taking responsibility for myself, that's going to create the real impact in the world. And why would you put off living for something like a life beyond this life that you're uncertain of? Like, the thing we can be most certain of is what's here in physical reality now, what's measurable. And what's measurable now, like Hal was bringing up, is how many people are starving every single day? How many people die every day? How many people are abused every day? And that's like the most obvious points of abuse, let alone every single human being abusing their own physical bodies, chasing all these feelings, and the greater system that is cultivating that through mining everyone's money and forcing everyone to mine their own physical energy. I mean, it's all set up to disempower the individual. And how you take your power back is by figuring out who you are, what you've accepted and allowed in your life. And it takes a lot of work, and it's not that fun. Like, sure, it's more fun to create when you're more effective, but getting nitty gritty and being vulnerable with yourself and exposing yourself to yourself can be very difficult. And a lot of people just want the pill to make it easy, the fast track, the dishonesty, right? But when you're really honest with yourself and you're just committed for life, and you realize, I may not perfect myself in this lifetime, but I'm committing to do everything I can to do that, knowing that that is ultimately the best thing I can do to impact the world, is take responsibility for myself. And if you just base your spirituality on that, of like physical, measurable responsibility that you're taking for yourself as an example, so other people can do the same, like, you don't have to hope anymore. There's no hope required for that. There's no anybody outside of you for that. There's only you. And that's the most empowering thing, is realizing you have the power to change the world through taking responsibility for yourself. Through your taking responsibility of your inner world, you change the outer world. And it starts with re-educating yourself on a very fundamental, basic level, and being honest with yourself that you got to start at the bottom because you weren't programmed correctly. So that's what I wanted to share.
Dude, Jess, that was great. I wanted to add from what you had said that there's a lot of like, and within religion and spirituality, there's a lot that revolves around like making the individual who's participating in it feel special. You know, like just from what you were saying of like, oh yeah, you know, God talked to that farmer's wife who talked to that farmer who invited him over, who he rolled in his field, and see, you got something to live for now, and like it makes you feel special, even though like nothing. It's just like you're here, you know, and here's a way to make you feel special based on nothing really. But a lot of spirituality, like even like the new age stuff, is like that too. It's like, oh, I'm special because I know some things that you don't know. I know the law of attraction or the secrets of the universe, or you know, I'm connected with 5D, blah blah blah, you know, and it's just a way to make you feel special without actually having to do anything, without actually having to change. I just want to add that in there.
Yeah, right on. Okay. Thanks everyone who shared so far. So we got I see Sandro, I see Owen and Justin. I see all you guys are speakers. Want to hear from you?
Yeah, cool.
Go for it.
Yeah, this is Owen from Miami, Florida, USA. Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to share my story and my spiritual journey, if you will. So I started out in Christianity in a small town up in Canada. And I was, like a lot of people, forced to go to church. And I did not like that. I didn't like to go to church, you know. And I remember one time, I remember just not liking it. And when they would pass around the money basket that and you put money in there, I would specifically only put like literally like a penny in there, just like not like necessarily to be spiteful, or just like I just didn't understand what this whole like ritualistic weekly Sunday meeting was, and I didn't like, why am I giving my money to this thing when I can go buy like candy or junk food at the store or whatever, you know? Um, and some people will get mad at me and say like give more or whatever. I remember another time I was falling asleep when I would go to church because I just found it so boring, and I remember one time I fell asleep, and when I woke up, there was someone next to me and just giving me a really bad scowl, like real, like just like looking down on me, and you know, so I did not have a good experience going to church when I was very young, and after I went, that was from a small town. I went to a bigger town, and I didn't have to go to church anymore. So from that point, it was like no religion for me. That's not for me. I don't want to do that. I was always sort of a nonconformist, going against the grain. Whatever everybody else was doing, I wanted to go against that. And so, come into my 20s, just doing my own thing, you know. But then I found this audio, "Your Wish Is Your Command," and then that introduced me to law of attraction. So then now it's like a new form or a new age, if you will, of spirituality. I got into that. And what really kind of screwed me over was I thought I had manifested a bunch of money with this law of attraction thing. And so that really like got me sucked in really, really badly. Like that was like everything to me. Law of attraction was it. Like I'm like 25 at the time. And that was like, oh my God, I found the thing. Like this my life is so great now. I'm like, I'm financially free and life is so good. And it's like what a lot of you are sharing. It's just like all self-interest, completely self-interest, right? And what destiny represents is giving, like thinking outside of yourself, thinking outside of your bubble of your life, and actually thinking about how to change the inner, like Jess mentioned, to change the outer, actually, you know. But at that time, it was just like buying stuff, you know, buying clothes, experiences, um, and just me in my own bubble, you know, not thinking anything about child, you know, abuse or like the starving children around the world. Like, it's very interesting when you're in that whole world that is very real. You know, 10,000, 20,000 children die every single day, you know, from preventable causes such as hunger, which is crazy. But you never think about that. That never once came across my mind ever. Even though I had all this money, and it was just like, what can I buy next? What can I buy next? Like, what do I want to experience next? What do I want to do now? And it's like, you know, renting Teslas and traveling here and buying this and trying to, and another thing was like, and trying to impress everybody, like putting it out on social media. It's like this really self-convoluted, you know, life. But and that was my whole like spiritual like personality at that point. And then I found destiny and the search was over, because although it wasn't like a switch, it was a self-realization of like, oh shit, like there's a physical reality that actually, like, there are children that need help. There's a world in this world that where there's so much crime, there's so much stuff that needs to be changed, and destiny has that curriculum to learn from and to change yourself and to realign yourself, you know, because there's some good things in spirituality, just like what Cameron said, just realigning it so that you can make a difference in the world actually, right? um and I'm just so thankful and grateful for destiny, because it really helped me change a lot of things. Because at that time I was actually like, even though I had all the money in the world, I was living in a great city in Toronto in Canada, I had my own place and everything, I had my own car, I was depressed, and I was smiling. I used to do this really like kind of a weird game where I would kind of a funny story. but I would do this like contest where I would walk around and I would play this game that I made up in my head. I was like, okay, if I see somebody that's not smiling, and if I'm smiling, that means I beat them. So like I would walk around with this really fake, inauthentic smile, trying to like pretend to be happy. And then I would walk around in public and then, oh, that guy's not smiling, I'm smiling, I beat them. And then go to the next thing, the next one. And then just like, it was like this way for me to like remind myself to smile. Just so, you know, it's there's a lot of weird things within, you know, the whole spirituality world. And that's just one of them, right? But yes, destiny was the thing that really, really helped me shift everything and shift my perspective and bringing everything actually back to physical reality. And today, you know, it's like being able to be a husband, to, you know, take care of my wife, to have our own place for her to, and that's a good example too, to actually give. Like she's giving her body to have a all natural at home birth. And that's what spirituality should be. It's actually giving, you know. And right now she's pregnant, and again, like she's giving herself. Like she's tired because, you know, her body is 24/7 unconsciously growing this baby within her, and she's giving her body for that. And that's what spirituality should be. And just scaling that to the whole world so we can actually create heaven on earth. And that's the objective of destiny, is to actually create heaven on earth, not just in our minds or we think it is, but actually creating heaven on earth through the equal money system, giving basic needs to everybody as the first step, and then so forth. So yeah, that's my story. Just wanted to share that. Appreciate it.
You know, awesome, Owen. Thank you. Sandro, you're able to share. I know you have a homestead with 7 kids, and I know you're always doing stuff. So, otherwise, we got Justin, we got Joel. Okay, cool. I see.
Hey, I'm here, Mitch.
Yeah. What do you want to
Cool.
share?
Well, first, real quick, I know Tim had talked about a lot of people returning to Catholicism, supposedly. Although I don't think the numbers quite reflect that, but a lot of kind of prominent figures are shifting that way. So they're kind of trying to make a comeback. But having recently left that sphere, I think a lot of that has to do, at least I can speak from my own perspective when I was Catholic. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you recognize that there's something very wrong in the world as it is. And, you know, you try doing things within your immediate sphere, but you don't see things getting any better. And so eventually you just get to a point where you're like, oh, well, you know, I'm just going to turn to this and commit myself more fully to this, because it's out of my hands, you know. Like Jessica talked a lot about taking responsibility, and Catholicism specifically gives you a lot of things to do. You know, there's a lot of different rituals and sacramentals you can participate in within Catholicism. So in being able to spend your time doing those things, you feel like you're making more of a difference. But I just finished reading Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect, and it was really interesting to see the parallels between that and spirituality. I was listening to an audio from Bernard where he was talking about self-perfection, and a lot of Christians have a tough time, I know, even with the name self-perfected, because they feel like, you know, only God is perfect. But in the Bible, even it says to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And in that audio, Bernard was talking about, if God is perfect and we're to be like God, then we are to be perfect. And he talked about a couple of some things being acts of God, that being self-forgiveness. You know, 'cause even in the Bible, they talk about how only God has the power to forgive. So when you forgive yourself, that's kind of an act of God. He also, I believe, mentioned common sense and responsibility as well. Maybe one other thing, creation. I don't really remember 100%. But it was really interesting to look at those, acts of God, especially in light of just having finished the Metamorphosis of Pride and Intellect, where you have this just huge dichotomy between, I'll try not to spoil the book for people, Drake, but there's like in the change where everything is controlled and perfect and you can't die, and it's like, that's basically heaven. And it gets to a point where they have to end up defining humanity, and what it means to be human, and whether or not you can be human in a state like that where you're in heaven. So that's something interesting to look at. But then after the fall, then they're going like almost out of their way to go through all this unnecessary pain, and not, to make sure that things don't go back to the way that they were. And it's all because of fear. And I think that's the underlying theme between, or among all of the stories that have been shared today, is just this concept that spirituality is just like extremely based in fear. And you almost convince yourself that you should be in fear because you are less and you're not enough. And that kind of helps to justify the abuse, to the point where we're willing to trade the reality that we have here, that's like, that we can physically see and that's in front of us, for one that we are imagining to exist in our minds.
Hey, awesome share, Sandra. I just want to build on that a little bit. One, the book he's referring to is called The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. I don't know who the author is, but if you look it up, you can find it. Absolutely recommended. It's so good. It's pretty short. First chapter is a little wild, but just power through it, and it totally opened my mind to so much more by reading that. Another thing, what Sandra was saying here is about the fear in religion. If you think about it, it's like, especially when you're a really little kid, a lot of us were literally born into like a religious family. And so from, the first few months of your life, and you get baptized or whatever, and then you're going to church, and it's like your brain is literally still forming. So your whole limbic system, which is your emotions, is coming online. And it's at this time where you're basically being sold this idea of, okay, you can either be a good boy or a good girl and follow this kind of arbitrary set of rules, and you will have permanent bliss forever, when you die. Or if you even question it or you don't get it right, you will literally burn in hell for eternity, and you will feel excruciating pain forever in total isolation, and you'll never see your loved ones again. And it's like that is literally the deal that the church makes with you. And so that's why so many people can get triggered, and it's like they can't even compute the words to say, because it's like, I mean, you could call it the limbic resonance within them. It's just this fear is in there, so they're like, I can't even question it. I can't even hear you. That's why so many people will get triggered by the idea of self-perfection or the message of destiny. Yet you can see the common sense of what we're talking about with the principles. And the first principle is best for all. And, the second one is self-honesty. And the third one is self-perfection through self-creation. It's like, it's basic common sense stuff. It's sound, the principles themselves. Yet it's on each of us. That's why Jessica and so many people have talked about self-responsibility, is to actually take that responsibility to look within yourself at what are you actually reacting to? Does it make sense? And then the best part, and this is the final part I want to share here, is then you can ultimately apply self-forgiveness. And forgiveness has been such a distorted word used by the system to perpetuate slavery, because it's like, oh, who are you to forgive yourself? You need forgiveness from Jesus or from God or from the, bishop or whoever. When in reality, you can absolutely forgive yourself. Now, it's not as easy as just going, okay, well, I forgive myself, that I, whatever. But the actual structuring of self forgiveness through words, through sound, through writing allows you to write yourself. So, writing, WRITING, with the specific self forgiveness statements, which you can get through DIP Lite. And if anyone wants this, or if anyone's listening to the recording, you don't have this, just message me or message anyone who spoke here, and we'll share that with you. But that allows you to then write yourself, RIGHT, and writing, not in some moralistic way, not some, good, bad way, but it's in your self honesty. Are you actually acting in accordance with what would be best for everyone around you? And I know we talk about, best for all a lot, on these. And if anyone's hearing that kind of for the first time, it's like, some people get triggered by that. And maybe we'll do a future discussion on all the details of that. But it's like, let's just look at the basic common sense, like some people have been saying here. Okay, 20,000 kids die every day from preventable causes. Is that best? No. That's something we can all agree on. Kids should not die from hunger. Okay. Should sex trafficking be a thing? No, it shouldn't. Okay, cool. We can all agree on that too. Should everyone have clean drinking water? Yeah, great. Like there's basic fundamental stuff that we can all agree on. And so either I've found throughout this journey of life, there's kind of two types of people in the world. There's, let's say, type 1 people who are open-minded enough. They're kind of willing to question things. They want to change. They want to, see the world change. That they want genuine improvement. And then there's type 2 people who are just like fucking spiteful. And they are not willing to question it, and they don't care, and they are going to hold on to their beliefs potentially to the grave. So my goal is always, hey, I want to find the type 1 people, and I realize I'm going to have to sift through a lot of people to find them, but I'm looking for those people who want to be part of that change, because we don't need everybody on board right now. We just need enough people to be those movers and shakers, and then you change the culture. And that's how, like Owen was saying, we can actually create heaven on earth, not in our minds, but in actual manifested physical reality. And we can do that, over the next couple generations. It's like, that's what I'm dedicated to. So cool. Thanks for that, Sandro. Cam, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Just a little point. So think about this point. If you accept that you are God, okay, not the God, but just God, and everyone equally is God, people would go into fear about that, of like, oh, you're egotistical, you're going to control everybody. No, that if you actually were God, is that what you would do? I don't think anybody who truly genuinely believes in God as a benevolent thing would think God would actually do that. So if you actually were God, would you have any needs? Like, maybe you would have needs based on your physical form, but would you have emotional, like, neediness kind of needs? Or would you be like, what can I do? How can I serve? How can I help? How can I improve things? You really think about yourself and be like, hey, I need to eat. I have some basic bodily functions. I need to take care of myself. But, I don't need power and control. Like, I'm here to serve, because I'm not looking for something. I'm not searching for something. I'm just here. It'd be like if you went over to your friend's house and they were building something and you're just like, hey, what you guys doing? That looks pretty cool. Can I help? Instead of being like, no, I need everyone to pay attention to me right now. Like, I need everyone to look at what I'm doing and praise me. No, you'd be like, hey, what's going on? That would be more like how God would act on this earth. But the problem is we've been filled up with so much shit throughout our life, and we've accepted it, we participate in it, and we perpetuate it, that we can't see ourselves that way. So we're like, there's no way I could be God because I'm so fucked up. So there must be this perfect being somewhere out there that will take responsibility for everything. And, I'll just speak for myself. I realize that is bullshit. It's all of us creating this. And my goal is to wake people the fuck up and be like, hey, let's just stop. Let's actually get back to a point of nothingness. you know, because God created everything out of nothing, right? So if we just realized, actually within myself, I'm nothing. All I am is just a being who is aware, and I speak and I can understand things. And then through communicate, and then I can make things happen, and I can physically participate in stuff. And that's how we shape reality. And part of that is my thinking, my feelings, and my emotions, and what I participate in, and the relationships I form. And just taking everything back to ground zero. And then saying, like, okay, if I were God, what would I do? Now we're not at ground zero. We've got already a manifested reality that we're a part of, and there's some really cool parts, and then there's like a lot of problems as well. And so, what would God do in that situation if God woke up one day and realized, okay, I'm in this human body, I don't have superpowers, I've just got what powers this body has, and I'm either limited or empowered by the information I understand and that I can process and that I can communicate. And now I'm going to make it my goal to go and coordinate with all the other beings that have maybe similar capabilities to me to sort out all the problems in this world. Because if I were born in the shoes of a child that was starving and I couldn't do anything about it, I'd want someone else who could to fucking do it. And I know we talk about, oh, the starving children, right? The people in Africa that are starving, and people might think, oh, platitudes or something. But it's like, no, we don't care about that. But do you care about BlackRock buying up all the fucking real estate? Do you care about Bill Gates fucking putting weird ass vaccines in the fucking milk in your grocery store? Do you care about Monsanto putting what the fuck ever glyphosate or whatever in your food supply? Do you care about fucking chemtrails? Do you care about conspiracies? Do you care about fucking anything that's affecting your life? If you do, you got to realize it's all the system is all interconnected. So we tend to only care about things that affect us because it inconveniences us. So when we talk about maybe like the children starving, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter. But at least that's a point you can come back to whenever you forget from them when things are going well in your life. Like Owen was saying, like, hey man, so, hey, I've been to the landfills and I've seen children literally living on top of the fucking landfill. Like that is fucked, and it's all just because of the money system. That's what has to change is the way we value money, the purpose of it. And currently our money system is just designed to only benefit a few, and it doesn't even benefit them at the end of the day because they're not considering the full consequence of everything that's being created, the full consequences of reality. We're just so limited of what we experience just in this life, and we forgot who we really are. And it's interesting because if you look at all the major religions, people go, oh, well, you know, they all have truth in them. But I noticed it's always the things that it's those truths that are agreed upon in all of the religions. Love your neighbor as yourself, like be kind, compassionate, help people. It's all those positive things are the ones that like are not actually implemented. And it's all like the other shit that anyone actually cares about, like Sandra was saying, like the prayer beads and all the different rituals you can do. Like that's what people actually care about, not the self-responsibility. And I think maybe that's what makes destiny and these points so inconvenient, infuriating for some people, is because you realize like, oh, this actually means I have to change. I can't just go and do what the hell I wanted to do. But if you just realize one point, and then I'll pass it to somebody else, just realize this one point. What you think and believe you want to do, your self-interest points, whatever you call it was all pre-programmed. It's not really what you want. What you actually want is a world that's best for all. You just don't have the words for it yet. And you didn't think it was possible. And you don't realize that like you're like that abused what was that woman that was like from like, you know, in the Rockefeller, she was like some weird slave or something. There was some woman interviewed on Patrick Bet David podcast where she was talking about being like some kind of like a child slave of like some, you know, elite family. And she was saying how she still felt like guilty to some of them. And it's like that's what the system done to us. It's like kicked the shit out of us and abused us, all of us. And yet we still try to defend it because it's the only thing, like Jess was saying, that gave us any sense of security. So we're like, if I question it, I might die. Like if I question God, I might go to hell. If I forgive myself, like God might abandon me. And it's like, why would he do that? Why would God abandon you for trying to take responsibility for this world? In fact, if there was a God, that would kind of be what he's looking for you to do, because why would God want to be in heaven with a bunch of people who just sat and worshiped him and just put all their faith in him that he's going to make everything great. Wouldn't he want equal creators? Wouldn't he want a bunch of other beings that are like, yeah, I'm going to take responsibility no matter what happens. If things go bad, I'm going to stand up and take responsibility. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah, and just to add on that real quick, Kim, is I think there's like a important, spell breaker that we need here is in the religion world, it's like people will see the Bible as this thing that cannot be questioned because they're like, it's like the living word and it's like inspired by God. So like, because these certain things are in the Bible, it's like truth. It's kind of this like nebulous idea of that. Okay, well, but the Bible is like legit, right? And you have the Muslim people will say that about
They just
the
haven't read
Quran.
enough sci-fi. They haven't read enough sci-fi to see like, oh, like that could literally just be some like 4-dimensional artifact created by aliens that just, trapped you in your mind. You have no
Well,
fucking clue.
totally,
It's just a big puzzle that seems so complex. And like, I mean, look at what like an AI can do now.
dude, totally.
Imagine what AI will be able to do like in 30 years or something. And you're like, what, you don't think some fucking aliens in some other dimension could create the Bible or the Quran or whatever and make it seem all perfect? And it's funny because every argument someone has for why the Bible is the word of God, like the Muslims have the same argument.
Right.
So I'm like, it's the same pattern.
And it's like when you look at the history of it, it's like there was a meeting of a bunch of elite people who came together and they said, okay, these books make the cut and these books don't make the cut. And if you actually look into it and you read like the Gospel of Thomas, it's like that one didn't make the cut. And it's funny because that one is the most empowering out of all of them. It's like Jesus is doing the most radical stuff in that book. And so it's like just for anyone hearing this, it's like just if you're still clutching, because so much of the stuff is unconscious, and subconscious, you're still kind of clutching to like, but maybe there's some truth in it. It's like, just realize that things like the Bible are able to be corrupted by people, by our system that we have, that is basically designed to just perpetuate itself and create a bunch of debt and create a bunch of slaves. And so to just be able to let that go and realize, wait, you can actually decide for yourself what is common sense, and then you can work in almost a new identity of how you see yourself and how you see the world. That's really what destiny is. That's everything we're talking about here. So there's that.
I've yet to meet a Christian. And I've talked to very many who like they'll say like, oh yeah, I want to make the world best for all too. That's like in Christianity. And then you get down to it and they just like justify like, well, that's why I donate to charity. And it's like, where in the Bible does it say change the fucking system so that it's best for all? Where does it say that? It doesn't. And like, do you really need God to come down and tell you, hey, change the system to be best for all? Like, should it take God to tell you that? And even if God told you that, how would you even know if it's actually God? Like, what if every religious book said change the system to be best for all? Then everyone would do it? They wouldn't. Because you can't do what is best for all following an authority. If you're still coming from the starting point of like, there's something greater than me that is more powerful, that takes responsibility for all of reality, then that just means you're nothing. That means like not even just nothing. You just like you're inconsequential. You're irrelevant. So the spell has to be broken on religion, spirituality, all these points. And the specific point is that there is something greater. That's not egotistical to say there's something greater. In fact, it is a sign of an inflated ego to say that there's something greater than yourself. Because it's just a whiny little spoiled child saying, I don't want to clean up my room. I don't want to take responsibility. Someone else is going to do it for me. That's really all it comes down to. That's what has to change.
Yeah, so a long time ago, I had looked up the etymology of the word church, and it actually has Latin roots, ecclesias, in a group congregating in search of truth, right? And that like doesn't really fit the bill for what religion is now, for what churches are now, where they claim to be the truth. And the whole adage of divide and conquer, if you can create spirituality, if you can create a religion, if you can create the matters of the invisible and the matters of the physical, what you're doing is you're actually like splitting people up within themselves. You're saying, well, this is this compartment and this is this compartment. And it's like, well, it's all the same. And that point you were making, Cameron, about the self-responsibility, as like if you're God, let's just look at things on a practical mathematical level. Reality has a fractal nature, like it's all a picture in a picture. So are you God, like you're like the cosmos and you have the power of the cosmos, like that scene in Aladdin when the genie is like, I have all the power? Or is it more like you're a cell? You're just this one little, you're not even a cell, you're just like an atom in this whole construct that is just a bigger version of what you are. And so that's all within you. It's like when you look up at the stars, you see little dots of light. When you look down at the smallest parts of the electrons, you see little dots of light. And we're just what's in between. So it's all just this point of, it brings me back actually to reading the blogs, The Heaven's Journey to Life, where it references the I as the all that is. And so when you consider that spirituality at one point was the quest for truth, was like a direct path to like the conversation that you're having with life, with the mirror, if you want to call it. And then later it gets contorted, it gets conned and made to be this thing where now that conversation actually happens outside of you to some authority, and oh, luckily they have the answer for you, so you have to let them forgive you, you have to let them give you that okay, so now you'll follow that. But when it's a point of self-responsibility, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's usually like, to do what's best is usually really tough when you consider the weight of self-interest. But someone who's here,
Hey, Cam, can you hear me?
Did he cut out, or is it my internet?
Hey Drake.
Okay, all
Okay, I
right.
hear you.
No,
I
okay.
think did it all drop for about 20 seconds right there?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was like, what the hell's going on?
Okay, Justin, can you
Um,
still talk? Justin, we might have to come back to you.
yeah, I'll add this in since I've got a moment.
I can hear you, Drake.
No, that's good.
Okay. Was it just like
I
silent
think,
this whole time?
yeah.
I thought it was just me because I kept having fucking like audio problems this whole time. Like I would speak
No,
and then it would just be silence, and I'd be like, "Is just anything going on?"
yeah, we all went through the same thing.
Okay.
I think this con that religion did uh, is conning everyone into believing that we're not already in hell, and that this also this idea of like, once you're in hell, there's nothing that you can do about it, right? But meanwhile, we can actually change this, so we don't have to, like, we're living in the worst of what we've created thus far, but we have the ability to change it if we get our shit together. The point that you were making earlier, Cam, about like um, people thinking that there's something else that's going to take authority, or something else that has authority that's going to change it, and all this is like, yeah, that just prevents you from doing what's necessary here right now. Because if everyone's honest with themselves, it's like, come on, there's problems. That you don't actually enjoy every single moment of your life, and that there's things that you can see, like, hey, I mean, like, otherwise, why would you complain about the government? Why would you complain about anything at all? You know, as opposed to taking responsibility of like, okay, let's change it. Let's do something different. Like, I keep seeing all these posts on X and everywhere of people complaining about the Department of Education and oh, now these people, now they're going to destroy the Department of Education, or oh, I'm upset about these teachers, or what they're teaching my kid, or like, okay, yeah, but you're putting your kid in that situation. What are you actually doing about changing that for yourself and for everyone involved, so that that's no longer a problem? And same goes with spirituality, with religion, with everything. It's like, it's this consistent thread of looking for authority outside, but also at the same time, it's like not recognizing the hell that we're already in, and that we really need to change this. Otherwise, it will get worse. But we have the ability to do something about that right now.
Yeah, I wanted to share a little bit on the religious point. Can you guys hear me okay?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Hey,
Yeah, we can hear
Yeah.
you. We can hear
Giselle,
Giselle
we
as
hear
well.
you, and Cam, we hear you.
Oh, I can't hear Giselle. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Giselle.
Okay, yeah, so I was raised very religious as well, but not in Catholicism. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and a lot of what we were told, or from what I can remember, was that the fear that we had towards God wasn't because we thought he was evil, but it was the kind of fear like you would have to your parents, like the fear to disappoint somebody. So there was a lot of things that they didn't agree with Catholicism. For example, like getting baptized at a young age. They always said like, no, we don't do it until, after, the person can make the decision for themselves. So when I was 14, I got baptized within the Jehovah's Witness, and it was because we were constantly being told that once you got baptized within the religion, the fear of disobeying the word, the Bible, or in God's word, that fear would keep you in your faith. And as a child, a lot of the books that we would read, because they would make their own books for children, it was heavily programmed with Armageddon and demons. They don't believe in heaven or hell. They believe that there will be a day when things on earth will just be so bad that God will say enough is enough, and he will come with 144,000 angels and just come and kill everybody on earth who isn't a Jehovah's Witness. So growing up, it was always this thing like in our home, like, oh, if you leave the religion, or if your friends leave and you continue talking to them, then you're just going to be one of the people that God kills because you disobeyed him. And it's interesting because after leaving that religion, I I would constantly have dreams of Armageddon or demons and getting killed by one of the angels coming. And we were told that whenever, we were having bad dreams, or if we were to encounter like a demon, we would just have to pray and say Jehovah and just say his name, because his name is so almighty and powerful that it would make whatever evil entity go away. For the longest time in my dreams, anytime I would have like a nightmare, or I would see something in my dream, I would instantly start praying. And now, from walking this process and really understanding that, like, hey, I can forgive myself. Uh, I'm not, waiting on God to come save me. I'm taking responsibility for my life. In my dreams, when occasionally, and it's very rare now that I have a very like demonic dream, it's pretty cool to see how now, even unconsciously in my dreams, I'll start doing self forgiveness out loud. So that's been really cool. But back to the religion point, as the world kept getting, worse and worse, growing up, it would actually make like the people within our religion, our church, it would make them happy, because they would say like, yeah, it sucks that things are getting worse in the world, but that just means we're closer to paradise. We're closer to Armageddon coming here and getting rid of all the ugliness, and that means just paradise is going to come, and we'll be able to live with our loved ones who have already passed. And something that my parents would tell me is like, hey, if you ever leave the religion, like it's okay, because like God's gonna erase you from our memories, so we won't even know that you existed. So we'll be able to still live in peace in heaven or in paradise. So it's really interesting how all of that brainwashing and programming even still had an effect after leaving the religion. And finally now, until I've been walking the process, that I've been able to really let go of all those points and then look back at those points and see how none of that makes sense, and it's all just based off like a fear of getting killed by this so, you know, loving God that they say, you know. So I just wanted to share that because that was a really big point for me to walk through.
Yo, that is hardcore.
Hey, how many Jehovah's Witnesses are there? Is there like, isn't there like a certain number that can?
145,000.
I know. Like,
No, so
who's
if
like the 145,001th member? They're like, oh fuck, one of you is not making it.
no, it's interesting because they would say like if you are one of the 144,000 people that are going to go up into the skies with Jesus, you would know, just like you know you're a girl, just like you know you're a boy, and then that person for their life, they can't get married, they can't have kids, they can't do anything, because when Armageddon comes, they have to go up and be with, you know, with God. So if they had a wife or kids, then it would be selfish of them to do that to their kids, to leave them behind.
I just looked it up. There's
It says as of
8.6 million Jehovah's Witnesses.
Way
as
too
of
many.
last year.
Way too. Hey, in Destiny, we say it's all of us or none of us, so we're not exclusive.
Austin, did you want to share something?
It's like according to their rules, it's like, aren't there too many of us? Like, what are we gonna do here? Yeah. So people have brought up really good points here, and for me, looking at the point of spirituality, I mean, how it applied to my life. I grew up in the Christian church and went to Christian school for a couple of years, and like, kind of just reflecting on what people have said. To me, it seemed like spirituality, looking back as to how I used it and how I was viewing it and just how I adopted it into my own life. It's like spirituality was like the cool rebel cousin of religion that you always wanted to hang out with and that you felt more comfortable around. But I was still looking outward, just like I was looking outward within religion towards something that could help me. You know, I was still looking outward for a solution, even though the proposed concept is to start to look inward. It's like, no, I mean, now it's just okay and it's accepted to alter my mind, you know, to do the shrooms, the weed, the DMT, ayahuasca. That stuff's now accepted, whereas when I'm in religion, it's frowned upon and looked down upon as well. But it's all of it is still just the mind trap, you know. And like Drake said, it's allowing us to not have to do things now in reality, or the things that we do in reality are mainly about healing. And so, I mean, it's such a great business model, really, but it's not a solution. You know, even, you know, Giselle and I, we would do sound healing events and meditations, and it wasn't a solution. You know, people keep coming back. People keep needing answers, and we kept needing answers. And so it's like, at a point, when do you actually notice progress? And if we were to ask somebody that's in the spiritual space now, the word feeling would probably be within their answer. And so we understand that that's not best, and that's not rooted within something stable, nor is there the clarity within it. And so it's interesting, Justin brought up that point of the etymology of the word church. Just it's people seeking truth. people seeking a solution. And so for me, the spiritual side just allowed me to feel more comfortable because I was still looking for solutions. I knew that the things within the Bible, it didn't all make sense. It's like, okay, well, if I'm supposed to do this, well, this other thing doesn't make sense. Or if I'm supposed to follow this part, well, that's just fucked up. Like, that's obviously not what Jesus would want, because then that leaves out certain people, just like the Jehovah's Witness points, like there 144,000, but yet there's millions of us here. It's like, it said, I looked that stat up too, and it was saying that there was reportedly over 19 million people that attended the annual memorial of Jesus Christ's death last year. Right. And so it's like all these people gathered around, and it's like, well, if we're all doing the same thing, then who's going to go and who's not? And so for me, it was just interesting. Stepping away from the spiritual space allowed me to have to take more, well, it allowed me to see that I'm not taking responsibility. And so now I have to change this, because ultimately within the spiritual space, all that I did was focus on the things that were easier for me, but I still kept smoking, and I still kept abdicating the responsibility. And then it's like, well, I'm feeling positive, but then that pendulum swings negative. So then I got to listen to the motivational audios, and I got to go to the ceremonies, and I got to smoke the weed, and I got to do the meditation even more so that I can swing that back. And then we know the polarity is going to happen again. And so that's where we get caught. And so that's what I wanted to share from my experience thus far.
Hey, Mitch, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask every time because my
Awesome,
app
awesome.
keeps going out.
Cameron, I see you're unmuted, but I definitely don't hear you.
No, I can totally hear you. I got Mexico Wi-Fi right now. You're good, Cameron.
Okay.
Okay, well, you can hear me in Mexico. All right. Max wanted to add some points here. He's with me. Do you want to say something, Max?
Yeah. So,
Here,
like,
hold the phone.
what spirituality really is just a byproduct of believing in religion. And guess what religion is? It's like, it's just a cycle to keep people going in that they never just walk out of. It's like a moat that's very dry, and there's stairs around the side, and nobody ever remembers to actually go up the side of the moat using the stairs. It's so funny because people like just stay in the moat, like, and what we say is like, what are you doing? Just climb out of that moat that is religion. Like, why don't you just climb out of it? Like, but we got keep stamping around and marching along this moat, and they keep marching along the moat, and like, to find a little stamp crabs and mussels, like, gotta march around the moat, gotta march around the moat, gotta march around the moat, and eventually that's all they do all day. It's like, people shouldn't be participating in religion. Here, you can have the phone back now.
Who's next?
Dude, that was awesome. That was awesome. And the thing that keeps him in that moat, it is the king. He has to feed them, and the king is feeding him the people in religion, like fear and hope. Like, I remember I grew up Catholic, and I kind of, like, I think Owen said this, but I was just kind of like thrown into church. And by the way, if we're gonna smash this whole debate, Catholics are number one. So just to let everybody know, right, Sandro? But anyway, so I was
Hey, I
thrown
went
into
to a Catholic school.
What?
I went to a Catholic school, so I'm with you on Team Catholic.
Yeah. But that was a big thing
Well,
too. My mom, it's crazy how, like, this religion is number one. That religion is death. Anything outside of this is just bullshit. But anyway, the fear and the hope point, it's like I remember going to church, and I remember the priest saying some like very specific words about burning in hell, and I was pretty young, and I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? But I had this like weird anxiety come up, and then I looked at all the people like in the church, and they're all looking at the priest like nodding, yes, yes, yes. And so you can imagine, like, as a child being thrown into that, like that's the system impulsing you with the fear, like, of burning in hell. And then it's like the hope part is, well, if you pray, then you'll one day get to heaven. And so that whole thing, that fear and hope, I remember that, like kind of what Austin said, it was all through church and Christianity, and then it kind of morphed into spirituality. But it was the same thing. It's like when I was in Christianity, I remember I would pray every night, and I would pray for like stupid shit, like presents, and then I would pray for like to swim fast. This was my best swimming career this year, and it would happen. And so I'd like believe in it. So there's like a result, but I didn't look at the point of like, oh, I was actually going to practice every day, and oh, I asked my parents for that present. But then that morphed into, I stopped going to church. I stopped doing all of that shit in college. And then somebody approached me and they're like, yeah, have you ever read this, heard of Rhonda Burns and like Law of Attraction? It's pretty crazy. And they would tell me about it, and I was like, oh fuck, that's what I've been missing, because I've been in all this fear these past couple of years, because I was like, fuck, I kind of like walked away from the church, and like I'm not doing my praying anymore, so I don't know if I'm gonna go to heaven. And then now there's this new solution, and the new solution is just the same exact thing, but it just has a new name. And it's okay, now I can manifest, as in pray, for my dreams to come true, right? And it's now not God, it's the universe. So it's really interesting, because then when I found this group, it's like even at the beginning when I was using the tools and stuff, is I still had that fear and hope, and I was still like, okay, if I use the tools every night, I'm gonna get to, I'm gonna get to the things that I want, right? And all of this stuff, especially because I came into it with still with that like uh, personal development type of starting point. And as I've read the blogs and I've studied the material more, it's like you start to realize, if we live in a world that's best for everyone, best for all, what the fuck is the point of fear? Like, why do you need to hope for anything? Because you're not constantly looking behind your back. And so as you study that more and more, I've realized the fear and the hope, it's like it just falls off and it falls away. And that's when you start to see like, oh fuck, this is the end of the search.
Yeah, well said, Sam. Is that everything? Okay. I see you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to make it dramatic. I wasn't quite as good as Jess. Like her voice, woo. I don't know if anybody else
Well,
noticed that
maybe
on
you just
here,
have
but there's
to
like,
pray a little bit more, Sam. It's funny. I had that thing
yeah,
too.
that's
When I
okay.
was a kid, I'd be like, please let my sports team win. And I would like pray for like 30 minutes about the sports team winning. And it's like, well, what if the other sports team is praying that they win?
Dude, I prayed twice when I was a kid. All right. And it was in these 2 points that were very
Cool.
similar, but I was
Cam,
in a
I
point
can't
of
hear you.
extreme
If anyone else
stress.
can hear him, if you could come.
Yeah, we can hear him.
I can hear him.
Okay, that's so weird.
Okay.
I can't hear him, but
All right.
whatever.
Just come to Mexico, Mitch.
Hey,
I
just
I
go
think it's
pray.
reversed, dude.
Just go
I think
pray
you
about
got
it.
better internet than me
You
in
can't even
Mexico. Cam, you just talk and call on whoever, because I can't hear you, but obviously everyone else can hear you.
Okay,
So
okay.
you
I'll
take it
make it
from here.
brief. I prayed twice under extreme like stress and pressure. And both times I prayed, I got what I was like, God, I promise if you give me this, I'll believe in you and all that stuff. Even though I like in the back of my mind, I was like, I know there's no God, but whatever. I'm just gonna like see if I can game the system. It was almost like I was trying to hack the matrix. And then I got what I wanted, which in both cases was just feeling better about the situation. And then immediately after that, I was like, Yeah, I know that wasn't God. I just made that happen. I mean, at least I was kind of honest about that. But it's just self-hypnosis, you know? And then if you think about it, if you have two sports teams, aren't they both fucking praying? It's like, oh, who is more holy? Is that what it is? Like God looks at who actually did more good deeds? Like that's such fucking bullshit. That's definitely not how things are decided in reality. In reality, it's like who who did the bank decide is a less risky investment? That's who actually wins. Okay, so hey, and even then there'll be just AIs that'll determine that shit. So that'll be the God pretty soon. Who wants to speak next? I
Well,
see Matthew is a speaker. Justin.
well, I'm back. I got cut out there. I don't know where I got cut off.
I heard a bunch of it. I don't remember. It's been a while now, so I don't remember what you ended up with. But what else did you want to add?
Well, really, what became clear, and especially throughout this conversation, is just the emphasis on how much religion and spirituality itself have been kind of leveraged as a coping mechanism to existential dread, right? Like the fear, it's not that the fear is created, the fear is leveraged. It's being triggered. We already have this question of like, well, why? What are we to do? But it's like instead of just stopping and looking at what's actually here, and you mentioned it a few times, like being here and like to be divine here would be to just like be completely present. You're not having mental participations or mind games, and which existential dread itself is just a mind game, taking you out of the moment, making you question things. You're in your head instead of just looking, instead of just interacting, instead of just plugging in. So it's interesting, like where that initial fear kind of comes in. And I've looked far and wide, but like the Destiny materials really do bring it back to how like reality itself is, like we are fractals. Like it's in Heaven's Journey to Life, it talks about I as the all that is, or the all that is as me. So like are we God, like we're this cosmic being, or are we God, like we're this piece of the, and if nobody knows what a fractal is, it's where like every piece is like a holographic element where every piece, every little bit contains the whole, right? So it's a picture in a picture. You look up at the stars, you look out at the farthest biggest things that we can look at, it's dots of light to us. And you look at the smallest things and they're dots of light as well. So it's just like this concept that we need to live a spiritual life is kind of like the same as like creating a category of racism. It's like we've talked a few times in your podcast about how like racism isn't actually real. It's like this participation that's been drummed up to create division. That to me is what spirituality is on an individual level. It's a way of separating the individual within themselves, right? So that you can't forgive yourself because you're not the authority to do that. So, which, if there's anything that's been more supportive, the most supportive in here, and what the tools really allow us to do is to respond to these participations with self-forgiveness. Well, if we take that right, that power away, then how can we possibly be divine? How can we possibly step into that responsibility? Well, and this is the thing that had people coming back for Reiki sessions instead of actually taking up the responsibility, because the weight of the existential dread that was unreconciled within them, they needed something to feel better, to distract them, to suppress the questions of what they are doing with their lives. So I think what we are doing, the context, the information that Destiny has and is brought to the table, and the tools that we have, is the most profound and simple, not easy, but it's a simple way of reconciling that point within of the mental participation of the existential dread. And if you can solve that point, then like what was just said, I think it was Sam, there'll be no point for the fear.
Hey, well said, Justin. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was really well said. That point about the existential dread and kind of tying it to what Sam said also, it's like there would be, it wouldn't even exist. It's like we're born into a world where we're just a cog in a system, but that's not who we really are. And that's why that feeling of something missing, that's why it's there. And if we were born into a system that recognized who we really are and was considering everything we actually need, and it wasn't just like we sit on our ass and do nothing, like we would want to participate in that as well. This is not just you create some robot that just does everything for. This is not Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect for those who have read that, because that wouldn't be part of your education. Like, I don't educate my children to just expect everything to be done for them. Like, they're participants in reality. And if the system was set up to reflect that and to support that, we just wouldn't have that feeling of dread. The feeling of dread is the search for meaning. All of this stuff is simply because we're not recognizing who we really are, and we're not recognizing that in each other and then creating systems accordingly. We're only participating in systems just from the perspective of trying to survive. So even the idea of like, what happens when I die? It's like, if you know who you are, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't have that feeling of what happens, what's going to happen, because you just wouldn't care. No matter what context of reality you find yourself in, you're like, I'm going to take responsibility, and I'm going to only accept and allow what's best, and I'm just going to go from there. Because when you die, the total context of what exists after this life, you can't even possibly fathom, because everything you know is in the context of being in the body you're in, with the mind you have, with the education, with the family, culture, environment, everything. So there's just really no point in talking about the hereafter. But except for the point of realizing, and this is where the spirituality comes in, is I'm here where I'm at right now. I'm in the environment I'm in. I'm aware of what I'm aware of, and I'm going to do what's best. And I'm going to seek to improve my understanding of things so I can always do what's best and expand my context. And then within that, your afterlife, anything else would be covered. Oh, I see Gaitan's here.
Uh, yes, I've just joined, and
Okay.
I, I I had points that I would like to share, but I'm pretty sure that most of the points that I would like to share have been shared when I was not here. But yeah, I would like to jump in if it's possible, it's doable.
Yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so about spirituality, man, when I think about that word, spirituality, a lot of stuff come in my mind right away because me, I grew up in Africa, in West Africa, Benin specifically. And if you ever heard of voodoo, that word come from Benin. I don't know if that words actually come from Benin originally, but back in many hundreds of years ago in history, that words have been used in Benin to describe what type of spirituality the people in Benin practice. And the people in Benin, what they believe in terms of spirituality is all related to worshiping the nature. And a lot of people, maybe in the Western world, believe, yeah, those people there in Africa, they still have the ancient belief system that is actually good. And I've heard some of people here. Um, when I say here, I mean in Western world, since I'm living in Canada. Uh, when they ask me about the type of spirituality practices practiced in my country, when I start sharing about it, they start saying that. Same as they believe that uh, um, the native people of Canada, for instance, um, the type of spirituality that they have, a lot of people think that's the real spirituality. So you get into that place where you start saying some are real and some are not real. And specifically in Benin, when we're talking about voodoo, what they're talking about is worshiping the sun, worshiping the elements of nature, right? The wind, the earth, um, and then what is the worshiping of it? It's not actually okay. Let's do everything to maintain those entities in um, healthy living and make sure that the sun is care of and is taken care of and the earth is taken care of. No, it's not that type of worshiping. It's actually just getting on the knees and pray to the sun and ask the sun to do something for us and getting to the knees and ask the earth to do something for us. And then they have representation of all those entities, and they have different ways to to do animal sacrificing and the thing that you can imagine that people will do when praying to a god so they can. And back in the days, I believe uh, they a lot of sacrificing, like even human sacrificing, allegedly. I feel allegedly because I don't know for fact because I never did those things, but those stories exist in my country, and they worship those things, believing that those things are living entity, living not the earth itself. For instance, if we take the earth as a representation of spirituality, of a spiritual being that can do something for humans, um, they would be worshiping the representation of those things, doing sacrificing and asking the earth or the wind or the sun or the trees to be kind to us. And I can understand uh, on some point why people can believe that, but the way it is done, when you think about it, you see that there's actually just no point to it. Like that, if I go on my knees and I ask I ask the oh I need water, so I would like some water to fall from the sky. So instead of actually understanding how nature works and do the thing that is required to keep having good water falling from sky. No, I'm not doing that. I'm just praying those entities, and I'm doing different stuff that has really nothing to do with how those entities actually function. But I'm just behaving in such a way that I can convince my mind that I'm doing something, so then I can have water falling from sky, for instance. And also something else that they would do is worship dead people because in voodoo, we believe people in my country and people from that culture specifically believe that dead people become actually God. Like when you die, you become a God uh, in the afterlife, and you so you become God in the afterlife, and you are taking care of people here on earth, and kind of similar to when uh, uh, in the Western world here, um, a kid's father would die, and then the mom will be telling, or the mom will die, and the father will be telling, "Your mom is in the sky taking care of you," and that kind of type of belief system exists here, but pushed very far. Um, in my country where they will be telling they will be worshiping those people going where um, in the cemetery and being doing sacrifice there to ask that person to take care of us. And that belief system of worshiping the dead people has been pushed so far that I there are stories like they will sacrifice other human and say, "Go tell the God, so the dead people, that we need this, this, and that, or we have make this decision, and you need to go there to tell them that we made these decisions, and then they will kill somebody, like sacrifice that people. And I'm not sitting here shaming that culture, but when you think about it, does it really makes any real sense? And the question is, the answer is not really. Does not add up. Like you can't do the math and say, yeah, we decide something and then we can kill somebody. And that person will go and tell them that here what we decide. If they are really God, why don't they see directly what we decide? Why do we need to kill somebody to go there physically to tell?
And why doesn't everyone just kill themselves and become gods?
Right.
Like that would be the easiest answer.
Yeah, you see, but they don't proceed that way, and that's the culture. That's the way they think of spirituality, and even till today, I don't think the human sacrificing is still going on in Benin. If maybe it is, it will be very secretive, and it's not something that is being talked openly. But through history, we know, growing up there, that that's the belief system. And another type of belief system is sorcerers, believing in wishes. Like people believe, and that is literally till today, people still believe in that if their life sucks, and they're not having what they want out of life, is maybe a sorcerers is doing voodoo type stuff on them, and the people are, somebody will say, yeah, I'm a wish, and I went when I go to bed at night, I sleep, and then I when everybody's asleep, I can leave my body, go to a place with other witches like me, other sorcerers like me, and then we will uh, be together and play with people's souls, and engineer we can engineer bad things into other people's life. We can even eat people's souls, and people believe themselves to be sorcerers, and some people believe themselves to be victim of sorcerers, and that mentality is there. And the thing is, how do you know about how do you actually understand if that is the real thing or not? Is either you go and and pay a sorcerer, or convince a sorcerer to give you the thing to get into the cult of being a sorcerer, and then maybe that way you can investigate what is actually happening behind the closed doors of that belief system, and how somebody can, yes, behave. And after asking so many questions about that, because when from everything I've been learning, since I decided to break free from those belief systems and actually investigate them, what I'm getting to is actually that it's just in the mind. It's just in the mind, meaning, okay, so those stories always existed in the culture. So you're born and you believe that because your parents tell you so, and everybody in your surrounding is telling you so. So when your life starts getting uh, when your life start going down a path that you don't have control, you start freaking out and you go into blame, that you do not take responsibility for your life actually, and then you start saying, oh, there are some sorcerers in my family. And then when I start asking questions, or you start doing something that they call the fa. The fa is what is asking question to the divinity of the, and say, oh, why is my life sucking right now? Like, so those divinity will tell you, oh, it's because you have a sorceress in your family, and your aunt is a sorceress. And because that belief system exists, you right away believe it, and you believe that it's your aunt, and then you start hating your aunt or your uncle, and you start paying money to somebody to protect you against that, and it always come back to money actually. And why that person believe himself to be a sorcerer, and maybe that person can confirm that, yes, I'm a sorcerer, and I'm doing bad voodoo type thing to you because it confers him kind of a power, sort of a power, and telling everybody that I am a sorcerer, and then you can be afraid of me because that person um, can, entertain that belief system and believe himself to be something that is just in his mind. And when you think about it, man, that belief system have enslaved a whole country. And the missioners and the people with Christianity, they came in Benin using that belief system to get everybody to be enslaved to another type of spirituality, which is Christianity, which is religion, telling people, oh, you can break free from sorcerers and voodoo, and if you believe in Jesus, you are washed in the blood of Jesus, and then none of those things can you will be protected. So another deep core belief system have been installed based on that previous belief system that is there back in hundreds of years. And now people get into that polarity of I am either an animist believing in voodoo, or I am protected with the blood of Jesus, or I'm with Allah. And that is another belief system that people just get enslaved in, not realizing that actually I do not know any of those stuff. I do not know how the world actually function. And it always get back to the question that we asked the other talk that we had, which is what is education really? Where people do not have the vocabulary to process reality, to understand why is my life suck, why am I stuck in my life? Why I'm not getting what I want in my life? Why do I not have a good health? Why do I not have um, what it takes to have a good life? And when people do not have those answers, they start the blame game. And for me, spirituality is just a a, 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 a a game that you play in your mind to not take responsibility of your life, thinking that something outside of your life is influencing your life, who you are. And yes, something outside of your life is influencing you, which is the money system, which is um, these the way things actually work that you do not understand, and those things are the thing that are actually holding you back. And if you can stand up and increase your ability to understand, to process information, meaning increase your vocabulary, you can process what is going on in this reality. And then if we can change the system and make it so everybody can have these basic needs met, you can actually have the time to investigate all those questions. And maybe you get an answer before to leave this earth. But till then, pretend that something outside of your life is what is influencing you. So then you have to get on your knees, pray to a God, or even if you get into the realm of spirituality of the new age, where you say, yes, I'm the master of my life. But in the same time, when you look really what you are doing, you are just worshiping a sort of concept. When you get, for instance, in law of attraction, just become your another god that you pray to by thinking that through wishful thinking you can change reality without actually standing up and doing something about it. So it's always come down to that blame game where people are just putting their faith in something that is outside of who they are, of themselves, not actually taking responsibility. S- Getting on your knees and praying to a God is not actually taking responsibility for your life. It is not. Taking responsibility for your life will be actually in increasing your ability to process information, right? And understand how things are going so then you can take action in the direction of doing what is best for you and for everybody else, meaning doing what is best for all. So then eventually everybody will have his basic needs met, and you will be living here as a real God that you are, who is doing what is best for all. Because if you were a divine a person, um, remind me this great audio. What is I think the title is Divinity on Earth. People can check it on YouTube. But by Bernard Pullman, and I think even another one is by you, Cameron, a great audio. And in that audio, what is being divine on earth? If, even though you said yes, I am on earth, and I have a soul, and I am a god on earth. Or even though you don't say I am a god because you are so afraid of that word of being God, because you feel so unequal to your reality, and you say I am God's servant. What would a God servant do here on earth? Is it praying to his God all day and yeah, I'm your slave and do whatever you want with me? Would it be what you will be doing as a God servant? Wouldn't you be actually doing what is best for people? So then you will be, wouldn't it be the actual way to worship God? If you think of God as something that is best, wouldn't you be doing something that is best to show your allegiance to that God that is best? Because God, if God is so magnificent and good, wouldn't you be doing what is best for everybody in your surrounding? And in this word, and every action that you are taking will be in direction of I'm doing what is good, what is inherently good. And if you believe that, I don't know, wouldn't you be investigating how you can um, become the best version of yourself so then you can do what is best? Or would you just be on your knees and be praying to that God and say, when you will get back, you will do something? Think about it. Meanwhile, you are participating in a system that is inherently evil, abusive, where you work only for profit just so that you can pay your bills and live your tiny little life in your tiny little bubble and be praying. Like, how that makes sense? It doesn't. The only way that you can be divine on earth will be doing what is best and be investigating how can I do what is best and not just be separate from everything else and trying just to pay my bills, but I will actually be spending my time on earth doing and investigating what is actually best. So if I want to sum it up and answer um, what spirituality is really, spirituality should only be you are doing what is best for everybody. That's how you can be divine on earth. And if you do that, you will be creating a world that is best, and the heaven, the paradise that people envision will be the result, the byproduct of everybody here doing equally, doing what is best and helping other to see and do what is best, and that will create the heaven that everybody is dreaming of. And if you die, think about it, you will never regret. Like you will get out of your body. If you die, if we can project the death of our death, our last breath, you get off of your soul, come out of the your life, because you believe that soul is something. So I will be using that vocabulary for now. So I would say, if your soul is who you are, is who you believe yourself to be, and I think it is not who you are, but if that's what you believe, okay, think about it. Your soul get out of your body, or your life force get out of your body, and then you can say, oh yeah, I spend all the time that I have on earth investigating and doing actually what is best, what is good for everybody, meaning what is best for everybody. That's what I self-honestly have been doing here on earth till my last breath. How can you possibly be unhappy knowing that you have done that? So that should be the only spirituality that will be valid, because you spend your eternity doing what you know being best in every sense possible. So you should be investigating that. If you're not doing that, and you are doing any sort of type of thing that you believe to be spirituality, where you are doing it just for your survival, you are just doing what everybody else is doing. So you are equal in one in that contest, but you are not creating a world that is best for all. And you will face a massive regret when you will leave this body. And it is not a belief system. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. When you will die and you will be thinking of, oh wow, so I lived all my life on earth. I spent like 80 years on earth paying bills, working for some from a system that I do not even know fully how that system is having and what type of impact that system is having on earth. And I know that people have been abused by that system. And my reason for participating in that system till my last breath was just, oh, I need to pay my bills and oh, I need to survive. And I never actually put that on side and say, okay, what is it that is actually best? And am I doing that? You never ask that question till your last breath. Man, that would be sad. And unfortunately, that's what everybody is doing on earth. And that's why the word the word is so fucked right now. That would be my 2 cents. Thank you.
Dude, well fucking said, man. I can't think of a better way to sum up the whole point and to put it so clearly. And, just one thing I just wanted to add, just based on kind of what I was seeing within what you're talking about when you're describing Benin and the spirituality there. And imagine someone being like, oh, they're so primitive, like I have Christianity. And it's like fucking just the same shit. It's not any more sophisticated at all. And then you got the new age stuff. It's not any more sophisticated. It's just it's like the Christianity, they took the voodoo stuff and then they just said, well, if you sacrifice this guy, he can go talk to God for you and he washes away all your sins. And then in spirituality, they're like, oh, you just sacrifice, basically yourself as challenging the system. You sacrifice yourself as any kind of real authority or power in this system and just let yourself dissolve into the oneness of energy of the universe, and all will be given to you, and that will wash away all your problems. It's just the same story over and over and over. There's no actual self responsibility for changing the system, there's no self responsibility for doing what's best for all. And at the end of the day, you can kind of look at this reality that we're in as sort of like a containment. It's like a prison. Everybody here is actually super fucked up and super self-interested and doesn't give a flying fuck about anything else. And like Mitch was saying, there's those two types of people, the type 1 and the type 2. We're actually all type 2. And there's some of us who are like seeing the value in being the type 1, and that's this process that we're walking, and we're supporting each other, and we realize it's not just about going to and getting someone else to do it just for the sake of it. It's like, oh, it only really works when we all take self-responsibility. And how do I know if I'm taking self-responsibility? If I'm supporting someone else to also do it. Because then collectively we start to wake up and we realize like, okay, now we can sort out these problems. If you only are measuring your success by yourself, and it's not okay, yeah, you could measure your success by how much you quote help other people, but you're not fundamentally changing the nature of the system we live in. So that's not a valid measurement. It has to be based on, am I moving myself towards standing up in this system and supporting what is best for all? And there's like different nuances as to how each person might express themselves within that. But at the end of the day, when you really boil it all down, it comes down to the money system that we live in. And money equals energy. And spirituality has just become a way to distract you to pursue an energy game within yourself so that you'll never challenge the real game, which is the money system. That's all it comes down to. Anybody else want to add any closing thoughts before we end it for today? I think it's probably a pretty good stopping point.
Oh yeah,
Matthew.
yeah. I won't be too long.
No, go for it. Yeah.
So the first thing that's coming up was I remember having a conversation with Cameron over the phone when he was asking me to become a distributor. And at the time, I could only look back now, after I ultimately did become a distributor and got to see the full picture, at that time, I'm like, oh, well, I do massage. And Cameron cuts in. He's like, well, how's that changing the world? And I'm like, I didn't really have an answer to that. But in terms of the entire kind of timeline that I walked up to that, I came in from Destiny when I was 14. And I was so young. It was nothing special about me whatsoever. It was just that I was young enough that when I found Bernard's voice, I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about, but I knew this is something, right? And so I was so young and so primed to hear it. But I went into a lot of challenges where everyone was on the farm and I felt small. I felt intimidated. And ultimately, around the year that Bernard passed and I lost my dad as well that same year, there was a couple-year period where I had gone into just total, complete isolation. It was too big. I was so small. And what I was holding on to at that time, and this is where it's going to tie into literally what Mitch said about spirituality and breath. I picked up that point of breath early on in my process just from the material and from Bernard, and I essentially isolated myself within it, as in to say, I went into total, complete, I'm just going to stop my mind through breathing, right? It's like, don't think, don't have a thought, it's like literally, don't even do anything, just breathe, right? That point Mitch was saying about breath and spirit. I turned this point that I did get from Destiny into spirituality, literally, the breath. And my point here as well is I didn't have Techno Tutor, I wasn't there on the farm. But it was only once I got Techno Tutor, I did come back around. I'm like, okay, I'm not really changing. This isn't really getting me anywhere. And I slowly kind of started to see, and this was around when Cameron first messaged me about becoming a distributor. I'd already bought Techno Tutor. But again, it wasn't like what it is now, where there are so many people, and it's undeniable now. If you were on the ranch and you have anything to say differently about what we're doing, you're full of shit, right? It was indisputable, like we are actually living it now. And so once I had the tool to actually process the Destiny material, right, I was able to become a part of the group, start getting real support, start actually being able to process the Destiny material. And my point is, you can cherry pick from Destiny and you can turn it into spirituality. You can abuse the Destiny message. You can say, I like this part, and I'm going to just take it, and no one can challenge me because I'm alone. And that's for years, just all I was doing, right? And now where I'm at here now, how have I actually changed that? How have I redefined that? When I got back, only through the group support was I able to finally go to my apartment, get all my things, and leave what has been an extremely abusive relationship I've been, just cut it out and leave. And so how I'm now living as the breath isn't isolating and hiding away. It is do the things I need to do and breathe while I'm doing it. When I'm going door knocking or talking to people about the tools, I'm here and I'm breathing. In a nutshell, that's kind of what I wanted to share about how Destiny by itself, alone, isolated, you can turn it into anything, right? Without the group support, without the tools to actually process it, you can cherry pick and turn it into a spirituality. And now where it's different is actually having and using the tool that I can process effectively, and not just that, but standing together with many, many people. It is like, it is night and day, right? And now I'm actually moving myself for once, for real, and still breathing, still using that as a tool, but as an anchor, as a, okay, here's what I need to do today, breathe, take a step, and do it. And yeah, that was what I wanted to add.
Thanks for sharing that, Matthew. Also, we've got Captain Ace. I actually don't know your real name, but it says Captain Ace on here. But I know you spoke last time on our other one. Did you want to add some stuff? I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
I apologize, guys. I thought.
Yeah, no worries. Go for it.
Yeah, my bad. I wasn't concentrating. This is how powerful like the conversation is. I'm listening to this with a friend, and it's like, I totally forgot I requested to speak. So, I'm gonna quickly go back to how back in the day, if you notice, like, or if you remember, the Catholics would do the sale of indulgence. It's like, hey, if you commit a sin, come pay for it and you'll be absolved. It's like, no. For me, spirituality is knowledge, because those guys had the knowledge back then to convince people that when you commit a sin, hey, just pay for it and it'll be fine. But why do we think we have all the abilities that we have? We have them for a reason. The problem is people are not critically thinking. Spirituality is knowledge. Like, if you have knowledge, you act upon it. And if you don't have it, well, there's mass confusion. Like, a lot of people helter skelter, don't know what to do. So whoever is controlling that narrative, obviously they know what they're doing, because if you believe in the concept of a God, well, pray to that God. The God is the reason why everything's happening. It's a control mechanism when you think about it. But if you have the knowledge, then you know how to act. And somebody said this a while back in the group about how you're asking for forgiveness. How do you think the God you're asking forgiveness would feel if he's already giving you that ability? Because when you do self-forgive, guess what? You're not going to do that again, because you understand why you're self-forgiving. The only reason you would go back to doing that is because you don't have that knowledge. So it makes sense for people to go pray to a certain thing because of lack of understanding, so that they can be absolved of that. And it's like, no, you have to critically think about it. And the only way you can do that is by having knowledge. That's what my understanding of spirituality is. It's knowledge. The voodoo people, the occult, whatever you want to call it, they don't just conjure or do whatever they do based off of nonsense. They have a certain knowledge to do the things that they do. So it makes sense, like, why the elite, or whatever you want to call them, have the system the way it is. It's like, that's how people won't be angry at us, or won't be angry at the situation, because, well, they can just go pray to God and everything would be fine. But then if you don't take action, if you don't move and create, well, guess what? You're not going to see the results. Like, I was reading a book the other day about how Julius Caesar left equivalent $270 for all Romans back in the day. Why was he able to do that? He had the knowledge, he had the resources, and he used that to his advantage. So you wonder now why everyone's like scrambling and, unhappy with whatever it is they're dealing with. It's basically just lack of knowledge. And if you have that knowledge, well, guess what? You're gonna act upon it, right? So that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Well said. Okay, I am not currently a co-host, so if anybody else wants to speak, you have to ask Mitch. And if I don't see anybody, maybe we'll just wrap it up. Any objections? Okay, I'm gonna assume not. Okay, so why don't we leave the conversation there? I mean, like, we could seriously keep going on for hours and hours. There's so many dimensions to all of this that we haven't even touched on. But this is a really cool kind of foray into the whole concept of spirituality. We're gonna have another discussion next week, probably same time. I'm assuming. I'm sure if you follow Mitch here on X, he'll post about it. If you're friends with us on Facebook, we will post about it there a few days in advance. But we're going to make this a regular thing. So I don't know what the topic will be, but we have a whole list of topics that we want to go into in our series that we're calling the most important conversations in the universe.